Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order at this time. If you will, please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, Lord, we thank you for this beautiful day you've given us today, Lord, and the time to come together as a community, make decisions that benefit our citizens, Lord, and the staff and the leadership that work in this community. Father, we pray special over those that are sick or injured in the community, that you'll bless them and keep them safe. I pray that you'll bless this meeting tonight as we go through the decisions, making things that make our kingdom and for you and for our community better. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, gentlemen, you have the agenda in front of you. I do know we have one change or one addition to the consent agenda. It's a special event consideration and approval to allow St. Mark's AME Church to hold its annual back-to-school community day on Saturday, August the 18th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. located at 409 Bridge Street. As a request to add that to the consent agenda. That's one change.
So moved, Mayor.
Okay, we'll got a motion to add that to the consent agenda.
Second.
And a second, all in favor? Aye. Okay, we'll add that to the
Mayor,
consent
I
agenda.
also like to make two changes to the agenda. I asked business item number 3 related to the SRAC fees for town employees be moved to consent. And also in that motion, I would like to ask that the consideration and approval to adopt resolution to close 2nd Street be removed from the agenda and add discussion reference to traffic studies.
Okay.
That's the remainder of my motion.
Okay, so I have a motion to move business item number 3 to the consent agenda and remove business item number 4, consideration for a resolution to close 2nd Street, that to be removed and in its place to add a discussion about the traffic study. Correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second to make those changes. All in favor? Aye. Okay. Motion carries. Okay. Any other changes at this time? Okay.
Mayor, I make a motion we approve the agenda.
Have a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed. Okay. Motion carries. Thank you. Okay. First item this evening is a presentation of the Appearance Commission, the Appearance Commission's annual report. I will call on the chairperson, Ms. Peggy Scott, to make her presentation. Welcome.
Thanks. You should have all gotten our report in your packet. Hello, I'm Peggy Scott, chairperson of the Appearance Commission. I'm here tonight to present the annual report. Our members are Alice Harris, vice chair, Anita Linderman, Brian Gibson, Jeremy Pierce, and Perry Harris. We also have 3 openings still available. Regina Sanders stepped down this year after serving for 11 years. She worked very hard and offered tremendous insight on past experiences and was a true leader and a lovely lady, and we will certainly miss her. Our completed projects for this year, the library front and back courtyards. The African American Monument has a new stone marker explaining the story behind that artwork. The added landscaping with 9 trees and 4 large areas of plants and mulch to the Miracle Park baseball diamond. We replaced the American flags and poles along Market Street. And as always, we thank the JP and JP George funds. We added 10 paperbark maples to Market Street. Coming this fall, we will, through the donated tree program, we received 9 new trees, and those will all be planted. Our park board has replaced all 11 signs at the entrances of all town parks, and we have provided the landscape plan and all materials for those signs, and those will be completed in the fall. It has been my pleasure to sit on this board and work with the wonderful staff that we have. They are always ready to help. They work tirelessly in heat, cold, and rain. And no matter what we come up with, they get the job done and never seem to mind. And we are truly very lucky to have them. And on behalf of the Appearance Commission and this whole town, I want to thank the staff. Is there any questions or concerns for us from the council?
I would just say thank you very much for your work.
It really is a fun project to be on. Yeah, we've had, it's amazing to see how much the town has changed in just a few short years just by, all of us working together. So I will close with just this little bit. What a great year it has been. In any garden, you can always find work. But the best part is the rest and peacefulness that comes afterwards. Sit a while and soak up the beauty. Smithfield is a wonderful town with so much to offer, and we appreciate the ability that the council gives us to keep her beauty alive and thriving. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Scott. Thank you to your entire commission for all that they do. Gentlemen, we'll move on to business item number 1, consideration and approval to enter into an agreement with Buffalo Road LLC for residential reimbursement.
Mr. Pearson, I have you off hold.
Turn that over to Mr. Manager.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. See if we can get this working. I don't think I can do nearly as well as the person who was just here before me. She did an outstanding job. But I'm going to try that. Okay. Before you tonight, we have a request to enter into an agreement with Buffalo Road LLC to assist in reimbursement of some infrastructure to build the up to 315 residential structure subdivision on Buffalo Road that you see here on the overhead. Right now, this is vacant property. It is actually in the ETJ. It is not in the city, so this would all be contingent on annexation. The developer, Reed Smith, is also here this evening if a question should come up specific to that development. What you see here is 9 different phases of this development. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Basically, what we're asking for is to enter into an agreement. You have a contract in your packet. I believe that contract starts on page 15. This is a contract that's been litigated by our attorney, Ernie Pearson, and Buffalo Road LLC's attorney. Our attorney for this matter is Ernie Pearson. We have him on the phone here now, so he is listening to this and he'll be able to comment or answer any questions you might have that are of a legal matter. And I'll ask Mr. Pearson to go ahead and state his presence.
Yes, I am here on the phone, and I'll just remain silent unless there's any questions.
Yeah. Go ahead and sit that up. Please. Thank you, Mr. Pearson. On page 19 of your packet is portion of the contract. You'll see where there are maximum reimbursement amounts for each phase of this subdivision that the town would reimburse Buffalo Road LLC for building infrastructure. That infrastructure primarily consists of water and sewer infrastructure. There are some curb and gutter and some stormwater as well, but our maximum payments would be those per phase that appear on page 19. Overall, all 9 of those all 9 phases, the total reimbursement would be no more than $1,131,938. The reimbursements can be no more than 1.5 phases per year. So as we go forward and we budget these maximum amounts, not saying we'll necessarily spend that, but we'll spend up to that amount. We will budget those amounts at 1.5% each fiscal year going on, depending on how these things build out. Maybe it'll be 1 year, maybe not. The reimbursements will not occur until such time as there are certificates of occupancy issued for the properties, the residences that are built on these properties. So, as an example, if you have 40 residences being built in phase 1, and I'm not sure that's the exact number, but it's close, there's a prorated amount for each one of those properties, and we will pay that up to the $155,636 of reimbursement. We estimate the water and sewer costs and the other costs to equal about $389,090. So we're paying about 40% of that infrastructure. Once that infrastructure is completed, houses are built, certificates of occupancy are issued, that's when we start paying the money, because that's when we'll start seeing tax revenue come back to the town in the form of property taxes. That's when we will also start charging fees for water and the sewer. And we'll take ownership of all those pipes at that time. Well, what's before you tonight is in your accessory packet. On the second page, you have a resolution that goes with this. What you're being asked to do is approve that resolution and approve the mayor to enter into the contract with Buffalo Road LLC to reimburse for the water, sewer, as well as the curb gutter, stormwater that they do up to these maximum amounts.
Mr. Scott, I have a couple of questions. It's appropriate to ask you at this point. The first thing, just to clarify, you did mention that this area would be incorporated in the town limits before these funds are paid.
That's correct. It would have to be annexed prior to any funds being.
Second question I have, during the discussion we had with Mr. Pierce, when we were looking at these agreements, we discussed putting a separate line item. What part of the budget would this be allocated to, coming out?
We have money coming out of both water and sewer and electric budgets and under economic development lines.
So y'all will keep an eye on it?
Yes.
What's the anticipated tax revenue from that subdivision if and when it's totally built out?
I didn't do the math on that off the top of my head, but when I did do it, I can tell you it's about a 5-year payback on what we would be paying. If that answers your question.
Any other questions, council?
I move we adopt the resolution and approve the signing of the agreement.
Second. Motion and a second to approve. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson.
Yes, thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Ernie. All right, gentlemen. Before we move on to the next item, I think Mr. Smith is here. Thank you for choosing Smithfield for your new development, sir. We look forward to you breaking ground in that neighborhood. Thank you. Some great things. Okay, gentlemen, we'll move to the next business item, consideration and approval to sell property located at 916 3rd Avenue by Upset Pit.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. We have been approached by a realtor who has a buyer who is interested in purchasing the property at 916 3rd Avenue in Smithfield. That currently is a vacant lot. When I asked our town attorney to review it, make sure it was something that we could sell, it wasn't a FEMA lot or anything like that, he came to the conclusion that it could be sold, and we believe it became owned by the town through a condemnation period several years ago. There was a house that sat on it, since been torn down, and there's nothing on the property at this time. Does not appear to be of any interest to the town to keep that property. We have no plans for it. It doesn't adjoin to any other city property. It seems like right now all it is costing us money because, one, we're not getting any tax revenue from it, and two, we're just having to continually mow it and maintain it. So should we decide to sell the property, you can only sell property by one of three ways. You can sell it by upset bid, by auction, or by sealed bid. What I'm asking the council to consider tonight is to allow us to list this property for sale using an upset bid process. What that will do is we will go back to the realtor, tell them that the council has agreed to sell the property. They will then come back with a bid, and we will bring that back to the council at the next meeting. If they choose to accept it, then if you look on page 39 of your packet, the statute explains how we proceed from there. Basically, they have to post 5% bid. We publish notice of the offer, and then other people are allowed to bid, and it just keeps going up from that point. So my question to the council is, one, do you want to sell the property? And two, if you want to sell it, is it okay to start with an upset bid process?
I'm sorry, I don't know where the property's at.
It's at 916 3rd Avenue.
I'm sorry. Can you give me some reference, because I don't know where that would be.
Okay. It's over on, I don't know, I'm going to ask the police chief if he can tell me exactly where it is. I know it's over on the east side, but, yeah, but I'm not exactly sure of the
It's next door to 914.
Midway and 3rd.
Oh, is it?
Mike, the statute says the city may receive, solicit, or negotiate. I would rather start from a negotiated price first that's subject to upset bid, not just to receive an offer or a bid that we accept without negotiating. Is that what you had in mind?
Well, yeah, I figured we would negotiate with this buyer first, and then once we come to a conclusion, then it would have to come back to you, and then we would start the upset bid process.
Mayor, I'd like to ask a question. Sure. Mr. Scott, what would be the interest of the party that's interested in purchasing? Would it meet the zoning that's there?
I do not know. I have not talked to the person who's interested, just the realtor. The gist I got is that the person interested in purchasing owns an adjacent property or perhaps lives on the adjacent property, and they're just looking to expand their property. I don't have any idea. I mean, the zoning is residential. So.
Unless it improve the community, I think it's reasonable, but I just want to make sure we don't put something there.
Right. Well, certainly anything that a zoning would require a zoning change would be something that have to come back to council, just like anything else.
The other concern I have, touches on Mr. Ashley's comment, is about the value of the property. We just opened it for bid without a reserve. I think it should be at least whatever the tax appraisal is, area, or maybe a negotiated bid to start with, and then let it.
And that's what we would do, is negotiate the bid first and then start the upset bid process. But even if it comes back as, something really low and that's all they're willing to do, we don't have to accept it. We can turn down the whole thing and
So
not
you're
sell
saying
it
we're
all.
not selling it absolutely?
Right.
The last sentence on that law said the council may at any time reject any and all offers.
Right.
So we're not under any obligation to, even after the end, the final bid, we may say, nah, we'll just keep it.
Any other questions?
Make a motion we approve.
Second?
Second. And we'll move on to the item that was added, business item to discuss the bids that we have received so far.
Yeah.
for a traffic study on the side of
Thank you,
Just
Mr.
for
Mayor.
clarification, as some citizens may not be aware, we removed the closing resolution to close the street, and we've come to discuss the bids for the traffic study.
At a meeting, public meeting that we held, more of a workshop on the 31st of July, to discuss the water plant and the closing of Sixth Street with concerned people, citizens, residents of that area. It was determined that a traffic study should be done on any ramifications that might come about by the closing of that street. Following that meeting, I asked our planning director to engage several companies to look at submitting proposals for a traffic study for that purpose. We have received a couple of bids back. We have not received the required 3 bids yet. We believe we will, but we believe that these bids will come in under $5,000 for this traffic study. In order to expedite the process, what I would ask the council to do is to approve whatever is the low bid for the traffic study, the lowest reputable, reliable bidder, as long as it does not exceed $5,000, so that when we do receive the bids in, which should probably be this week or next week at the latest, we can engage this traffic study right away. Otherwise, we're stuck waiting until September to come back with you with the last bid. We would certainly email you out the bid tabs once we receive them all and explain to you that we've accepted the low bid. If we didn't, I wouldn't ask for permission to accept anything but the low bid at this point. We believe all the bidders will be reputable.
Questions for Mike?
Just for clarification, Mayor, the real purpose of this is to gain further information on how the changing the traffic flow will impact the community.
That's correct.
And that would include discussion of closing the stage.
Yes.
Make a motion, we approve the request as stated by the manager. $65,000.
Second. Motion. Second. All in favor? Thank you, Mr. Manager. Okay, Ted, we're moving pretty quickly through this,
I'll keep it quick, man.
300 and something, 333-page agenda now. You always make me nervous when you start pulling up your PowerPoint. But you do a fine job, sir.
Do I still have good hair, sir?
We'll move on to.
Thank you, sir.
Business item number 5, bid award and contract approval for the Riverbank project.
How do we get rid of this thing? How do we get rid of this thing? No, how do I get rid of? Killing me. Okay, there we go. There we go, sorry. Thank you for letting me come and speak to you this evening. The purpose of this presentation is to explain to the council what the Riverbank refurbishment project really is. I mean, we all have kind of an idea when you say refurbishment, kind of a picture in your head. I just wanted to lay it out for everybody. The Riverbank refurbishment project is a project that was approved under the Utility Department 10-year capital improvement plan. This project was approved as part of the most recently approved budget for construction and completion during this fiscal year. What it actually does is it reestablishes the bank of the river at the water plant intake structure to a better condition that's easier to maintain and is actually usable. This is a profile view of how the intake structure was originally built all those years ago. You can see the support structure in the river and the end of the pipe. That's our actual water intake. and the stairs that lead over to work the valves and the gates. Here, the blue line shows the water level of the river during the drier summer months. Over the years, and especially within the last two, the erosion of the bank has grown and is endangering the steps and the support structure of the walkway. And if this were to fail, access to the intake pipe would be severely hindered. This project will create a sheet pile wall and backfill behind it. This will shore up the steps and the support structure. Further, this will allow for the heavy machines to dredge in and around the water intake pipe to remove the sand and unclog it. So here's a bird's eye view, an aerial view of the new wall and the backfill. And the shaded area is the backfill, the wall being farthest on your left. All permits for this job or this project have been required from all the necessary agencies. So the construction of this project was publicly bid on June 24th, and we received the bids on July 17th. The original budget for the project was $200,000 for its construction. The low bid came in at $317,000. So we are proposing to use contingency funds or funds from the contingency line item to make up the shortfall, thereby having no ill effect on the overall budget, and there are ample funds within the contingency line item to do this. So are there any questions?
Mr. Critter, go back one, just looking at your dates and your timeline. So you guys want to start the project when? How long after that would you start the project?
If we approve it and the contract gets worked out between the two attorneys, et cetera, it's, October is when we'd like to really start. Because we want to get in and out before any construction that may or may not occur around the water plant.
When you say contingency funds, Mr. Critter, are you referring to contingency funds in the water fund, or are you talking about general fund?
Water fund.
Want to make sure I understand.
Yes, sir.
Because I would be afraid that an impact that large on a contingency this early in our fiscal year could be dangerous. I understand that.
Yeah, it's
That's
water
the-
fund. Yes, sir.
Yeah, if I could add something to that real quick, Mr. Mayor Pro Tem. Our contingency amount is very healthy this year. As an example, fiscal year 18, our contingency amount was $140,000. This year, we budgeted $313,000 because we expected some possible runoff here. Even with the $117,000 gone, we still have $180,000 of contingency left. Last year, we used $40,000 of contingency in water and sewer. So I feel pretty confident that we can use that money for this purpose. And it is important.
Why is there such a discrepancy in the budget amount and in the actual cost?
After talking with the contractors, we believe that the issue is the sheet pile wall, the rise in steel prices, which is higher, but not necessarily that high. We have had some preliminary talks with the low bidder, but I can't, until it's approved, I believe we'll come in under that budget fairly substantially, probably in the area of 260 to 270 rather than the 317. There was also a line item in their bid for trucking suitable backfill, structural earth. We have a sand pile down by the river where we dredge that we're allowing them to use, which will also reduce the cost. But that was not part of the bid.
You only had two bids come back on?
We only had two bids, sir.
How many was submitted?
No, the two were turned in. We publicly bid, and we only got two. It's a specialized work item that we didn't expect to get more than 3 or 4, but 2 is what we got.
Mr. Critter, what caused this damage? Is it storm related, and can we use grant money?
I wasn't here all 40 years, but my guess is it was heavily damaged during the Matthew and/or the April shower of 2017. That seemed to be the biggest flooding issue, and it's been eroding steadily, at least during my time here.
So you don't foresee a likelihood of further eroding and redoing this?
Not with the
In the
sheet
near
pile
future?
wall. No, sir. I mean, we're essentially building a bulkhead.
So you're saying, just, I will make sure I understand that, so whenever this work will start and will be finished before we begin the work on the water plant, correct?
Yes.
Thank
That is
you.
my intention.
All right. Want to make sure it didn't hinder that.
Well, if we want water in this town, it doesn't sound to me like we have a choice.
Well, well, we can continue to, you see how far back the bank has gone. If that structure should fall in, you can essentially dredge across the river. It's just much more complicated and much more expensive. By doing this now, we'll save in the long run. It's just the classic, spend a little more now to save over time.
But you said you thought it would actually come in around 260.
That's where we believe it will come in. But I have to ask approval for the whole thing because I can't guarantee a savings at this time.
Move we approve it.
Second.
Aye.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Ted.
I don't know.
Okay, gentlemen, we'll move on to our first public hearing. This is not a quasi-judicial hearing, so therefore there's no need for anyone to be sworn in during this period. Is that correct?
That is correct.
First public hearing is ZA-18-04, Life Spring Church. The applicant is requesting an ordinance amendment to the Town of Smithfield UDO Article 7, Section 7.32, churches/places of worship, to allow for churches and places of worship within retail shopping centers that are located in B3 business zoning district. At this time, I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second, all in favor? Gentlemen, I will remind you that for this, it does require a 2/3 majority vote. 5 in favor, if you're in favor of this. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. So as the mayor said, Life Spring Church is requesting this text amendment. Again, their request was to strike 7.32 from the code, the supplementary standards, to bring it into conformance with the Religious Land Use and Institutionalized Person Act of 2000. That's a national legislation for churches. As I said, they wish to strike that supplementary standard altogether. Currently, places of worship are a special use in the B3 with these supplementary standards, with supplementary standards. The applicant's lawyer has argued that the RLUIPA, which is the acronym for the statute, is violated because the town is not treating similar uses equally. Generally, we're talking about assembly uses. Article 6, 6.15, Table of Uses and Activities, lists churches and places of worship as special uses in the B2 and B3, subject to 7.32. Whereas similar uses, such as civic and fraternal meeting halls, are listed as special uses, but they have no special supplementary standards. So we're not treating them equally under our ordinance. So both are assembly uses and need to be treated equally. Our town attorney agrees with their attorney that our code is not where it should be and is not meeting the requirements of statute. So the town attorney's recommendation is that the assembly uses should be treated the same in the UDO, and that the regulation should not present any undue or substantial burden on the assembly uses. So that second bullet point is kind of important. It's not only that you don't treat them equally, that you do treat them equally, but that you're not putting on any undue burden on a place of worship. And we'll get into that more. So the history of this, prior to the adoption of the current UDO, churches and religious groups were not permitted in any commercial zone, B1, 2, or 3. During the UDO committee process, updates were made, and the UDO committee did discuss this issue. And that what came out of the UDO committee, or what ultimately got adopted, there's question as whether it's what the committee really wanted. But either way, what we got is what we got today, with a supplementary standard that appears to be in violation of the ordinance, or the statute. The UDO committee reconvened on July 10th to discuss this. The committee did discuss a whole lot of different, issues related to it, but ultimately recommended what the town attorney is recommending with the current text in your packet. The planning board met on July 12th and reviewed the application and also recommended staff's recommendations. So a couple things about this text amendment. Fraternal and civic meeting halls is not a defined term. So it's part of a different definition in our code. So as part of the amendment before you, it's to use club or private lodge and then adding meeting halls as the term in the use table. So we're more clearly saying what we want. Typically, the items in the use table should refer to defined terms, so there's not a lot of question. So meeting halls related to clubs and private lodges, which is a defined term. So that's what this slide is about, and that's reflected in the definition change, or the table change in your ordinance. So what I have here on this slide is the recommended new language for 7.32. And I'm not necessarily going to go through the wording of it all here, but essentially the intent is to treat them equally and creating standards to which, if they are allowed in a B2 or B3 shopping mall, there's basically criteria here as to almost findings of fact within the supplementary standard to which they have to adhere. The key one is will not significantly increase traffic on local roadways within a residential neighborhood, will not decrease vehicular or pedestrian traffic or inhibit business activity for adjacent commercial businesses during normal business hours. It will not impede the normal and orderly development of the surrounding property for uses permitted in the district. And then there's some language associated with that. Okay? Do you want me? I can read it entirely, but it's in your packet. Staff is recommending amending Article 6, Section 6.15, Table of Uses and Activities. Again, as I said in the beginning, replacing fraternal and civic meeting halls with club or private lodge meeting halls, so it's the defined term in the table. Deleting under warehouses including mini storage, add the new use, storage facilities indoor, incorporating the definition for mini storage. And adding a reference to the supplementary standards 7.32, so adding an SS for each of the mentioned land uses. So that's all in your text amendment, but just pointing out that these are just sort of fine tuning of other parts of that ordinance. So here you see the table of existing uses. Places of worship and churches and places of worship are treated in the B2 and B3 as a special use with supplementary standards. There's an SS there. At issue is civic and fraternal meeting halls. Just below it is a special use with no standards. So that is kind of at issue why this is before you tonight. This is at least in part, why it's in violation of statutes. Again, the second bullet point I had earlier is that you can't put an undue burden on a place of worship either. So, outright restricting them from a commercial district could be putting an undue restriction on a place of worship because there's a lot of uses within the B3. For instance, the B3 is a very broad business district with all kinds of uses, some strictly retail, some not. And so you'd be putting an undue burden on a use that would be subject to scrutiny of a court. And Bob, if you want to elaborate on that, you're
Not
probably
the
more
last
versed
question.
than I am.
I think you're doing a good job.
Okay. If you need to add anything, please do. So here's the proposed changes to table 6.5. So again, club or private lodge meeting halls, and then adding the supplementary standard to the B2 and B3 and referencing it in the supplementary regulations on the far right, and then changing the warehouse uses, including mini storage, and changing it to and indoor storage facilities. Again, that part is really just kind of cleaning up some other issues related to uses in shopping malls that we currently have. So staff believes, again, this is staff's believes, that the text amendment is consistent with the comprehensive growth plan and that sorry, this is ignore this slide, it's a little bit goofy. We believe it is consistent with the growth management plan, and it's also consistent with the UDO, and it's in the it's reasonable in the public interest. Sorry, this slide didn't get amended. Staff recommends that Town Council approve ZA 1804, amending Article 7, 3.2, Article 6, Section 3.15, and Appendix A definitions, finding them consistent with the Town of Smithfield Comprehensive Growth Plan and other adopted plans, and that the amendment is reasonable and in the public interest. And with that, I'll take any questions.
I don't know that I have a question, but I do have some comments I'd like to make. I was on the UDO committee, as were a number of citizens in this town. We met for over 29 hours. Life Spring Church was represented at most of these meetings. Our intent with regard to churches was twofold. Number one, to expand the areas where they could go. That's why we expanded it to B2 and B3. The other intent of that committee was that churches and meeting halls and assembly halls be treated all the same. In addition to the citizens meeting with us, we had a town planner, we had an assistant town planner, we had a consultant hired by the town at the tune of about $30,000, I think. You had revised UDO that was, I hope, approved by our town attorney. It was approved by the planning board, and it was approved by this council. So it does bother me greatly that as soon as we spend this kind of time and this kind of money that we're now finding out that language got added that didn't carry out the intent of the committee or the planning board or the council. And it seemingly wasted a whole lot of time and a whole lot of money. Because the clear intent of the committee was to treat everybody equally and not put an undue burden on religious organizations. And how that language got added to just churches that prohibited from shopping centers and not added to the others, I don't know. Because the clear intent was to treat everybody equally. And we were also advised that those churches, meeting halls, and assemblies were consistently not allowed in shopping center areas in other towns. Now, be that as it may, as a council member, if that's the direction we're going to go, if a shopping center owner wants to lease to a church, then I don't think it needs to come as a special use permit to this council. I think it's either permitted use or it's not. We don't need a special use permit for things to become a political decision. Oh, we think that shopping center needs a church, that shopping center doesn't. You know, I think it's either, to me, we either allow it or we make it consistent and not allowing it. But why do we need a special use permit? Why is that a recommendation?
It currently is a special use permit, and that just provides greater scrutiny if there are any adjacent issues, proximity issues to other land uses. It provides an opportunity for the public to speak on the matter. And it has been a special use in our old code and our current code, so staff wasn't recommending anything different. That was not the issue that brought this to the fore.
The issue that brought this to the fore was that we had more restrictive language on churches than other
Correct.
similar assembly meeting hall organizations.
And both are special uses in our current code. Just one has supplementary standards and the other doesn't.
Yeah. First of all, the question is, you said that one of the statements was that there was restrictions placed on the churches but not on the other organizations. My question to you is, my understanding is, that, can you have civic organizations in residential areas?
Currently, the table of uses does not allow.
So the answer is no, you cannot. So there's already a restriction. Can you have churches in residential areas?
Yes, you can.
So therefore, there's clearly a difference in the UDO. There is clearly defined that there is some things that we don't allow certain things for, and there's some we allow for certain things for. Not trying to be discriminatory, it's based upon the growth plan. But also the question was, I keep reading the statements. We had this discussion a little earlier, that it talks about the, what was that thing again? I said the comprehensive growth plan. And the question was asked, I asked this question, and so I'm going to repeat the answer I got, was that I keep reading it saying that it is not as consistent with the Towns of Smithfield Comprehensive Growth Management Plan. But then when I ask how is it consistent, the answer is, well, it's not inconsistent. There's a difference to me between not being inconsistent and being consistent. Okay, just because it doesn't address it one way or another, that does not mean it's consistent. So I want to make sure I clarified that. The other issue to me is related to, I have a concern related to when we look at the town layout of what goes where. And we've had this discussion, I've been here since November, December. We've had this discussion a number of times about different things as we change, rezone different things, or allow special use permits for different things. And there's some things that are already there that don't meet that code anymore, but they're still there because. And the reason why they're still there is because they were there before that, but we won't allow it again. And the reason we won't allow it again because the town as a whole has made a decision that there's certain things we want to develop our town in a way that is going to lead for economic growth, for better quality of life, for parks and recreation, for all those things. And therefore, it's the council's responsibility, whether we like it or not. It's our responsibility to develop these things. I was not involved in the UDO, but the point was to develop those things, have it presented, have plenty of people review it, then vote on it, and then publish it. And then live by it. So therefore, my predecessors who developed these UDOs, their intent was to have retail space protected to retail space. My concern is, as I travel all over the state and all over the country, and I see retail space has been taken up by non-retail entities, regardless of what they are, that those retail spaces are dead to retail. They're dead. They don't come back. Now, some of them do nice jobs at building nice buildings and nice facilities. It looks nice. But the intent was retail. It is no longer retail. So it comes down to a point is, do we want retail space or do we not care? Because here's the deal is, we may have a retail place today that hasn't had occupancy in a long time. Understand? It's the responsibility of the landowner to go out and recruit people, to lower his rent, to improve his property, to recruit people in that space. It's not the responsibility of the town to do that for him or her. It's the responsibility of the landowner to do that. It does not take away from what we as a town say is the right thing or wrong place for it to be, the location for retail. So I'm greatly concerned when we lose retail space. Some people say, well, and I got to give an example, and I'm in West Smithfield. In West Smithfield, we have a little outdoor strip mall, and there was empty spaces. The landowner bought the property, improved the property, and there's not one single empty building there. So to me, it doesn't matter. Just because we don't have anybody there today, it just matters maybe different management needs to be there. I don't know. But my concern is once we make a decision that we're allowing non-retail to go into a retail space, we open the door for any retailer. Because now, how are you going to pick and choose? How are you going to pick and choose? Well, I'll let this one go there because that shopping center is dilapidated, not growing. Well, what if someone wants to stick one at the mall? I mean, at the Pottery. I say the Pottery, the outlet centers. I always say the Pottery. The outlet centers. What if they want to put one there? Well, how can we deny it if we didn't deny one? Because my point is we're setting a precedent. Either we're going to follow what the UDO is, either we're going to protect our businesses so they grow. We know there's a shopping center in Clayton that put a huge church in, and now the shopping center's dead. I guess the church is doing well. But was it supposed to be retail space? Or was it supposed to be a community service space? That's my concern. Should we treat everybody the same? Yes, we should. But our UDO already doesn't treat those two organizations the same. Because civic organizations cannot go in residential areas. Why not? Why not? Because whoever decided that, using the UDO, determined that that was not a proper use for it. And that was approved by everybody. So same thing goes with the churches. My view is we should treat everybody the same. So am I in favor? I'm in favor of making some changes, but I'm not in favor of reducing our retail space that may destroy retail space in our town. I'm not in favor of that. So I pretty much think I've said what I need to say.
I have a question for the town attorney. Mr. Spence, the applicant for this change recommended delete section 7.32. Your recommendations are different. Can you explain to us why?
Well, the applicant in the preferred world, I think, would permit churches, I can't speak for them, but would permit churches broadly anywhere, which is exactly the concern David is expressing on the far other end of the scenario. David has pointed out that churches can move into a commercial subdivision, as can any kind of warehouse, and basically hurt retail business in that subdivision. You might look at that for the warehouse space that's in Rose Manor. Rose Manor is not as viable a subdivision as it was, would you say, David, before they put in a lot of warehouse space. The reason churches can do that is they're like a meeting hall that sometimes does not meet except at night, okay, or on Sunday, whereas prime business area is maybe Monday through Friday or Saturday. In other words, there's not necessarily attracting a lot of business there during those normal commercial hours. It's not true just of the churches. It can be of a number of other entities, such as warehouses or fraternal organizations. What we have with churches is not just a matter of what you think or how you feel. What we have is a federal law that basically says you can restrict warehouses in places, but in the same place, you may not be able legally to restrict a church there. A church has a higher status, and it has a higher status by that law. So churches may be treated at least equally to all other similar groups, but they can be treated superior to those groups with quite much impunity. The warehouse space, the fraternal organization can't come in there and claim the rights of this religious land use act. I mean, because they don't have a statute protecting them. About that simple. So when we proposed the special use, what we were trying to do was get a means to balance the concerns that David had, which were concerns that the damage that a institution or any particular use which is not open for business during normal commercial hours, the damage that use could have on a commercial subdivision, especially when it's a large commercial subdivision, against the fact that there's not necessarily as good a justification for an outright ban or outright admission. So the special use is an effort to compromise that. You mentioned one of the things, there's a church that went into the Winn-Dixie Shopping Center in Clayton. I can't tell you the status of that church now, but when they went before the Clayton Town Board 10 years ago, it was a special use application. That's the way Clayton restricted it. There was opposition to that church within that actual shopping center. The opposition was for the reasons that David articulated, that it might restrict traffic in that shopping center, that it might restrict business in that shopping center, and that they felt that it would not have sufficient operation during the daytime. The church went in and showed that they were going to have daycare during the daytime. They were going to have classes during the daytime. They were going to bring people in on a number of different multi-use concepts to this very large amount of space that was dedicated to this church, and it was approved. There are churches in the Durham, Morrisville, Raleigh area, such as Summit Church, I know, that are large and vibrant in commercial shopping centers. So the best way to balance that, balance the concerns that David has against the rights of churches to have not only equal treatment, but really they've got a more protected status than other similar uses. Other similar uses do not have that protected status. Was the special use. That's a protection. Otherwise, you can open it up fully, which is what the church argument might be. Open it up fully, but you're going to have no restraint against the concerns that Mr. Barber so strongly expressed. You can go fully and deny it all, but I think you're exposing yourself to a legal suit, which would not be good for the town, and you are denying the fact that for whatever reason, whether you agree to it or not, churches currently under our federal law have special status.
Mr. Spence, you mentioned it, and I heard council mention it as well. What evidence do we have that the church hindered growth in the shopping center?
What evidence?
Is that just somebody's opinion?
I think it's difficult. I think it's
So that's your
difficult.
opinion.
Now, there is, if you are not open for business, okay, from 9 to 9 on most nights, let's say maybe you might be open on a Wednesday night, but if you're not open on Monday through Saturday on any of those nights, you're not going to be doing business. And you've done that by your own definition of operation and your own hours.
How does that hinder business in the area?
It means no traffic. There's no traffic. So in the Clayton situation, the local businesses in that subdivision, they wanted traffic to attract people to their shopping center. If you go out to the Pottery, you can notice they're located in the Holiday Inn Express, and it is at the back of the subdivision. You can look at the Super 8, which is less of a known and it's located up at the front. Holiday Inn is a destination. They can stick themselves in the back of a shopping center where the land's cheaper and more available, away from traffic, and they don't need to worry about picking it up. A lot of other businesses want to be close up where they can pick up traffic. Traffic's a big deal to them. So, every subdivision business is not a destination business. A lot of them want to be in front of traffic, visible. And to deny that is to deny the reality of business, I think. So the special use application is an effort to balance between these two concerns, which I think have been articulately expressed. It's an effort to compromise them, and it's an effort to do so after reading more of these cases than you want to know.
Any other questions from the council? If not, is there anyone in the audience who would like to speak on this matter? So if you will, please come to the front, to the microphone, state your name and address.
Thank you. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. My name is Lamar Armstrong. I'm here as attorney for the applicant on this issue, LifeSpring Church. I first want to say that I admire each and every one of you because this agenda, I was shocked. I can't imagine trying to deal with all these issues and try to fit it into 2 hours. So I'm going to try to be very brief with my comments and appreciate your time. We had a submission on this issue. I wrote a letter. It's part of that. I'm happy to answer any questions that anyone has about the points I made in there, mostly legal points and things trying to explain at times complex and convoluted legal concepts like Mr. Spence has been, and I appreciate his time as well and our very helpful and fruitful conversations on this issue. For the most part, I will just defer to our submission, and the reality is it would take me probably at least an hour to go through all of the different legalese and things and explain them in a way that's meaningful to everybody and answer everyone's questions. And I know we don't have time for that, and I want to respect everyone else's time out there too. And the next issue, I know that there's in particular a lot of folks, concerned citizens here in and on behalf of the community that would like to speak to that issue as well, which is LifeSpring Church's application for a special use permit. So for all of those reasons, I will simply say that I think Mr. Spence and I and everyone who's looked at this pretty much agrees that Section 7.32 as it currently exists is unlawful, does violate the federal statute. I call it RLUIPA, so I don't have to keep spelling it out every time. And so something needs to happen, and the question is what, and what do we need to do to balance the interests of and opinions of different folks the best way we can in a way that is legal. We would simply submit that the best thing to do, the simplest and best and most logical thing to do at this point is simply to delete Section 7.32 for the reasons I've explained in our packet. And I would just summarize it like this, just more of on a practical level, is this. Imagine, I'd ask each and every one of you, ladies and gentlemen, to imagine if you were a owner of a shopping center. It can be a 2-unit shopping center, it could be a 10-unit shopping center, it could be the outlet mall, or anything in between. And your shopping center is, you got some tenants, they're loyal to you, they've been there a while, and you have some space that's not been there, or not been occupied in quite some time. in a church, or it doesn't have to be a church, maybe it's a religious school, maybe it's a nonprofit that has, it's founded upon religious principles of some sort or another. And they want to pay rent to rent some of your space that's been idle for a while, and you want to do that, and you feel that as the owner of that property and as a businessman, you would like to take their business and you would like to work out a deal with them. If we are to pass the amendment that has been proposed, rather than just simply striking section 7.32, you lose your right to say who you want to be in that spot and who you don't want to be in that spot, at least as it relates to any and every, not even just business, but nonprofit or any group that has any sort of religious bent to it. And it could even be that all the other neighbors in your shopping center want them there. But regardless, you as a landowner, you as a shopping center owner want to accept that business, and yet the town has the authority to say no to you, to take that away from you. One of you brought up the point is, well, once we get into the business of saying yes to some, no to others, where does that end? And that's a difficult question to answer, and will certainly put the town in a difficult spot. So practically speaking, we would respectfully suggest that the best thing to do is simply to strike 7.32, and if and when down the road the town identifies a need, for example, to identify specific areas within certain commercial zones that are retail only, or to give more definition to religious uses, or to do other things to more carefully craft and address needs that actually arise and actually exist, then the town can always do that. At this point, though, knowing that something needs to happen, the simplest, easiest, most logical answer to that question that's before the council tonight is just to simply delete it. And like I said, in the future, if it needs to be tweaked some, or we need to do something a little different, then at that time the town can consider that. But we would just suggest that 7.32 be deleted in its entirety. And I'm happy to answer questions if anyone has any.
Lamar, I think you are correct that the town council is always in a tough spot. And one of our jobs is to provide for proper planning and uses. Just to give you an example, if we were to allow somebody to put a convenience store or nightclub beside your office, you wouldn't like it very much. 7.32 was really in there, in my opinion, as a mistake. At least a part of it. Language should apply to everybody, but I appreciate your diligence and what you've done. I appreciate what LifeSpring Church does. Nobody up here is anti-church, so please don't get that opinion. I really don't have a question, but that was just wanted to make those comments, and thank you for your diligence and what you've done. Quite frankly, I wish you'd have brought this to us during the UDO meetings.
But believe me, I'm not for a want of opinion, so had I known that were an issue, I would have, Councilman Ashley. But thank you for your comments.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I want to make another comment. The I think last month we had the issue about the nightclub. Since you mentioned that, we had a nightclub that was applying for a special use permit, which our planning board also approved, or the planning department approved. They thought it was unapprovable, that it was a justifiable application for it, and of course the citizens did not agree, and the council did not agree with that, and we denied based on that. Now the owner of the property certainly believed that it was within his right to sell his property and do what he wanted to do with it because he owned the property. But the town as a whole had to make the decision that just because you own the property, there's certain things you understood when you bought that property that you can and you cannot do with the property. And when you buy and build a retail space, you build it to build retail space. I mean, that was why they did it. Whether they were successful at it or not, is an entirely different issue. That some people are successful at business and some people are not. Some people are successful lawyers and some people are not. You know, I'm just saying, whatever you may do, that doesn't change the fact that when the initial use of that property was done and built an investment into it, it was intended to be a retail space. It was zoned as a retail space, and its whole purpose for being there was for retail space. To change that is a change for that. And therefore, that's why I think the town has to get involved and say, is this something that we want to have on a consistent basis? Because once you do it, you can't be prejudiced towards people one way or the other. And you know me you know I'm not against, I think we should have a bunch more churches in town. I just don't know if I agree that they should be in retail space. I think we have limited retail space, and our town is on the verge of great growth, and I think we're going to need all the retail space we can get. That's really my concern. It's not about the particular church. I've read the information on your church. It sounds like y'all doing a great job too. But it's related to the issue of what goes where. And that's really what our issue is. It's not related to any negative thing towards anybody. It's simply saying, what is our job? What is our job up here? If we have to look at the zone. If it's zoned for retail, do we have retail or don't we have retail? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, that's really what my concerns are.
Certainly understand your concerns and appreciate your comments. A couple of quick points about those things. The issue is not space that's currently zoned retail. The issue is the fact that we have 3 major commercial zones in town limits, B1, B2, B3. And currently under this 7.32, within all of these commercial, or at least B2 and B3, basically just churches, but religious uses can't exist in any shopping centers. So it's not just limited to retail space. This is a very broadly worded, broadly defined. If you read the definition section of the UDO, shopping centers are defined basically as any building that's got at least 2 or more units, and I think common trash pickup or something. I mean, it's very broadly defined. So if you look at it that way, most of, and probably the vast majority of available commercial space within town limits is shopping center space, once you consider that definition. So the effect of what we're looking at is that it would still, it's much more than just looking at, okay, we're defining retail space and we're limiting it to the outlets or to a couple of narrowly defined and narrowly tailored places where we specifically want to limit it to retail space. As Mr. Barber, you point out, it's much more broad in scope. And the other point I'll make, and I'll try to do this, an analogy in terms of, you were referencing clubs, meeting halls, and how we're to treat these with respect to churches, and Mr. Spence touched on this a little bit already, but imagine, most of you probably have children, or if you don't, you're close with someone who does. Imagine you have a child who's 16 years old. He's got his driver's license. You got a curfew Friday night. He goes out, he comes back 2 hours after the curfew. And you're still up, of course, because you're waiting on him. And you ask him, why did you not meet your curfew? In this analogy, if he provides, basically, the answer that you expect to get, if you're going to accept it, is it better be a really, really, really good explanation. Not just, well, my friends and I were hanging out, we were having a good time, so I decided to take your mandate as more of a suggestion, all right? So, whereas, so in other words, you're not just going to accept that as a realistic explanation. So the analogy is churches, and it's not just churches, but religion, and it basically draws its roots under the First Amendment to the federal Constitution, which we all know is freedom of speech, assembly, religion, those things. The idea is quite simply this. If you're going to treat churches either differently than other uses or otherwise are placing a, quote, substantial burden on churches or religious uses within town limits, you better have a really, 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 really good explanation for it, and it's got to be as narrowly tailored as possible. Whereas if you're talking about placing limits on certain types of businesses or commerce or things that aren't directly protected under the federal Constitution, not that we don't all think commerce is important, of course we do, but commerce in and of itself is not a protected Bill of Right. It is something that, as a town, you have far more discretion to place limits or constraints on. And so the explanation that you can provide for governing meeting halls or private clubs or lodges, that explanation doesn't have to meet the strict high, very, very, very high standard of explanation that legally under the RLUIPA you have to meet when you're talking about a religious use. It's really treated no differently than if the town were to start passing rules saying you can't speak about this subject in this area or that subject in that area, and obviously none of us would think that that was appropriate because that violates the right of free speech. The rights of churches and religious uses within town limits is treated similarly under the law. And so, and that's why I think, although he might characterize it a little differently when Mr. Spence is talking about, well, churches have an increased protected status, that's what we're talking about. We can't just, in other words, the inquiry is not just as simple as saying, well, let's treat religious uses similar to other uses, and well, we can say other uses can or can't exist, and we got broad authority to do that. The authority to do that with religious uses is much more limited, and that's why the law says if you're going to do it, like your 16-year-old, you got to have a really, really, really good explanation for it, and the explanation's got to be watertight, airtight, and that's sort of the way I would explain what can otherwise be complex federal law as simply as I can. That was a little bit longer than I intended it to be, but I hope that was helpful.
Does Raleigh allow churches in shopping centers? Do you know?
We have someone here who actually, yes, I'm told they do. We have someone here actually who used to work for the town of Raleigh and still does in a particular capacity.
He came to most of our meetings.
That's right. So I'll defer to the expert there, but I understand that they do, others do. I understand the idea of keeping retail space open for others. I love, but the reality is there's lots of space available, and I think there's plenty of room we as a town have to be able to accommodate everybody.
Yeah, why not let the marketplace take care of it? I mean, typically.
Can I say, something I also thought about, I was going up there. Come on down.
While he's coming, I will end with this. Just let the marketplace decide that. I think that's exactly right. If it's a church that's not doing things the right way, serving the town like we think churches should, in the end, they're not going to last very long anyway, so let the market correct itself.
Sir, if you will, please state your name and address.
Zach Karskeden. Still work with the city of Raleigh. Used to be in the zoning department and was a code enforcement officer. I work with public utilities now. Just started last week. So I did, but I have a background in that, and I was just going to suggest as well, I know something that somebody brought up was, well, what if we have a bar or other thing that, we have separation? Well, I know with in Raleigh we do a change of use, and so with any change of use, that would catch that. That would catch if if the church is going in and it wasn't there, and I think y'all have something similar here with the permitting process. So it would be it wouldn't have to be a special use. It would just be you would catch it in that because it would be a new use that would be going in there, and if it's within 50 feet of you already have that kind of set up. But yeah, we allow that in shopping centers and in all kind of business districts as well, and it usually works pretty well. And if you think about it, a church is really more apt to go in those settings. I mean, if you want to put a church in a residential zone, you've got to buy several lots, you got to knock them all down, it's got to be perfect. I mean, it's actually, churches are actually more, they fit better actually in the business zones, if you will. So. But, yeah.
From the marketplace point of view, I mean, typically what I've seen when churches are going in shopping centers, those shopping centers are vacant. And the owner needs a tenant, and they have reduced rent for that church, and they will be charging Lowe's Foods or Winn-Dixie. And so it's good for the churches, but in the marketplace arena, that if the retail space came back, you would think the owner's going to get concerned and start raising his rent. And either the church is going to pay the full freight at that time or find them an independent or another space. So, I mean, our intent on the UDO committee was to not allow churches, clubs, meeting halls in any shopping center. The language sort of got skewed. But we're also torn a little bit that it's the marketplace. You know, this space has been vacant. He may be shooting himself in the foot, maybe not, but you know, you're in business.
But I would say I'm not concerned about a particular application, because I could say, okay, that works great there, but the problem is you can't just say, okay, we'll agree with this one location because it makes sense, we're going to do that.
Right.
That's why there's special use permit potentially on the next thing that would be coming up. That's when you would deal with that issue, perhaps in a special use permit. But we're talking about changing the UDO that'll affect all retail space all across the town. Not limited to just those that are struggling, but it could be put anywhere. And then tell me how you're going to stop it. So if the local retailer that's doing well, and there's an empty vacant space, and the guy said, well, I'm going to charge you $20,000 a month rent. And the church says, okay, I'll do it. It doesn't matter if the next door neighbor likes it or doesn't like it. Because you see my point? I mean, that's what I'm concerned about. I'm not concerned so much about, I'm concerned about that when you change the UDO, you're changing it across the board, carte blanche. It's everything. It's not just one. It's everything. And so that's why I think we have to be careful when we make these type of decisions. I agree. That particular space we're talking about, yeah, I've been here. They never had a satellite place there last time I saw, and that was many years ago, okay? I agree. But that's not what we're talking about. That's something on the next item if we get to it. This objective is, are we going to allow retail space to be used for not just churches, but any civic organization? Because that's really what we're talking about. Any organization that's non-retail space. Are we going to allow that? And if we are, then we might as well not use special use permit. Because how would we ever deny anybody? I mean, that'd be my point. If we don't, how would we ever deny anybody?
And that's my argument, all or nothing. Get out of the
I'm
business.
actually with you on that, but I don't know if we're on the same side of the table.
Yeah.
I'll just add one more comment. Thank y'all all for this, and everybody, we're all trying to do the same thing. We all want to get something in these retail spaces. We want them to thrive, and I think another part of that change of use permit, it's not a special use permit, but just change of use. It's a, staff review. Yeah, zoning permit. Something that we require in Raleigh is, landscaping, other parking. They have to meet certain criteria. So you can bring them up to whatever criteria you want to, just like another business. If a business comes in, McDonald's was coming in, it was, a hardware store. They gotta meet 2018 standards. You can do the same thing, and it can be in the regulatory process. It doesn't have to be a special use to make it, like you're saying, to make it come up to a standard which would be good for the town. I mean, landscaping. We're talking about sidewalks, street trees. y'all know what I'm talking about. So, think about that. It actually could be a good way to revitalize some of these old properties, bring them into 2018 standards. You can do it in the regulatory process. You don't even have to have a special use permit. And that way it would also, churches would have to have a certain amount of capital to be able to do that as well. So, something to think about.
Well, I've got a question for Stephen. Stephen, would the change of use out there necessitate reconfiguration of that parking lot with islands and everything else?
Some of the current malls out there, it depends on which one you're talking about.
If a church goes into any shopping center?
We have a threshold. I think it's if you add 4 parking stalls, then you're triggering some of those requirements. But if you have adequate parking for the new use, I don't think you're going to be triggering. If it's just going to be changing the interior space, you wouldn't be triggering compliance. Again, we have thresholds for when you reach that, then you do need to come into full compliance. And we've had some of those issues recently at the Board of Adjustments.
On a special use basis, if you are the anchor in a subdivision, the kind of thing that probably Mr. Barber's concerned about. If you're the anchor in the subdivision, you're obviously, if you're closed the whole time, for whatever reason, whether you're a church or another institution, you're going to substantially affect the smaller units around that subdivision. If you're just going in as a small unit on the edge of the subdivision and are not an anchor, but are a small unit in itself, then your effect on the subdivision is much smaller. That's the kind of analysis you'd be making. Otherwise, you can just open it all up, but, you know, the open it up argument is basically justifies not having zoning at all. The purpose of zoning is not to open everything up.
Well, the special use permit process is not to allow only those applicants with attorneys to get approved, those without not.
Not ideal, it's like everything else. It's got its burdens.
Any other comments, questions in the audience?
You want to come up and speak? There's one more.
My name is Suzanne Taylor, and I'd like to address this.
What's your address?
105 South 3rd Street. I'm a co-owner of the Oak City Collection, new business in town. Judd over there is the other owner. From a business perspective, I want to see more businesses move in. I mean, the worst thing that could happen to us is anybody who is there now leaving. We get a lot of our business from other businesses. For instance, I'll have people walk in with no intent of being in my store at all, but they've got time to kill because they went to Cecil's to get their oil changed, and so they wandered in. Grapes and Grounds, they were a great source of business for us. Business is good for business, and I think when you move into a building as a business owner, or when you buy a building, you have certain expectations based on the zoning that's in place in that town at that time. And for a town to change its zoning, and perhaps now you find yourself in a situation that is terrible for your business, isn't fair. So that's just my business opinion of the whole thing. Thank you.
Anyone else? Questions from the council? If not, close the public hearing. That'll be it.
Second.
We have a motion. Second. Close the public hearing. All in favor?
Mr. Town Attorney, deliberation of this, how does it affect Oak City's business in the B1? Does this affect B1 at all? Or does it open the door for a text amendment on that?
We have not dealt with B1 yet because we thought it was more complex. You know, there are other improvements that we could make, including definitions, which I've requested that planner consider, but they would be more complex to the UDO that we've not done. This is a amendment we thought we could make fairly clearly without broad redefinition of code. To put in definitions is difficult. B1 area is a bit difficult, but there have been restrictions in B1 that have been allowed. I think there's been one in Coates where they allowed exclusionary zoning for churches in B1 areas, particularly if that B1 area shows an intent by the board to allow restaurants and commercial businesses to flourish in what otherwise was not a flourishing area. So churches have been denied in some of those areas. It's also been fairly hotly litigated. So we did not go to B1 yet. I think it's a possible consideration in the future as to whether it continues to be excluded like it is right now.
Right, it's currently excluded.
Whether that exclusion ought to have some definitions to it, because the court seems to like, in the cases I've read, the courts, federal courts seem to like explanations of why you do it in your code. I wouldn't have thought, but they do.
One more question. Let's dream big. Let's say I own a big shopping center. And let's say I don't want a church in there, so I have covenants. My covenants violating this federal law? Or am I gonna be forced to put in a church if they want to rent?
You know, this law was basically developed at local governments, and it's aimed straight at governments, okay? So unless you're the town operating that subdivision, which I doubt you are, you don't have this issue.
So I could have such a private restriction?
Yes. And you see a lot of private restrictions in Walmart, for instance, they'll say you can't have but one kind of restaurant, you see that all the time. They restrict all kinds of things.
The only thing I would like to say, the issue about I appreciate the business owner coming forward. It had nothing to do with being B1, B2, or B3. Her point is valid regardless of that. Her point was that if you run a retail business, you're hoping to get traffic from your neighbors. That's what you're hoping to do. I ran a business for a while. I didn't get traffic from my neighbors. I'm out of business. You understand? The deal is you got to have traffic from your neighbors. And I'm just saying, well, it's true. And so that would go back to the same concern, that you're not going to have that traffic if you put in organizations or you put in entities that are not retail. They're not going to get that traffic. And therefore, you're putting the business owner in jeopardy that they've come in. They may have a lease that lasts 2 years or something, and then something happens. Now what do they do? They have to file bankruptcy or something like that, or still pay debt. So I'm just saying, I appreciate your comments, because I think that's a very valid point that needs to be brought up and emphasized from the business owner's perspective.
Mayor, in order to get this problem resolved, I make a motion we approve the request text amendment to ZA 1804.
Second.
Motion and a second to approve.
As highlighted by the text. Town attorney. Motion to approve.
We have a motion to approve and a second for the text amendment.
Aye.
No. You vote like you want to, I don't care.
Just for clarity, have everyone.
It was 6-1.
You guys have a 2/3 majority, Madam Clerk. Thank you. All right, at this time, we will move on to the next public hearing. So this is a quasi-judicial hearing. So anyone wishing to speak for or against this matter will need to be sworn in by the clerk. So if there is anyone that's wishing to speak for or against this matter, which is special use permit -1808 Light Spring Church. The applicant is requesting a special use permit to allow for a church/place of worship on property located within the E3 business zoning district. The property is considered for approval as an unnamed shopping center within 1200 block of North Brightleaf Boulevard. The land lot parcel is further identified as Johnson County Tax Map 140-740-133. If there's anyone wishing to speak on this matter, please stand now and be sworn in by the clerk. For or against?
Just need to be sworn in at this time.
I don't have to come up here?
Nope.
Oh,
Yeah, you're fine, stay right there, you can
Okay.
get sworn in right there.
Do you solemnly affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
yes.
So anyone else wishing to speak? Now, anything on this subject? Need to be sworn in all at one time? Okay, now,
It's
okay.
very good. Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Okay. Thank you guys.
We'll call you.
Yeah. Yeah, you may. This time, I'll request a motion to open the public hearing.
So move, Mayor.
Second.
Public hearing stands open. I'll turn it over to the planning director. Stephen?
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this request is brought to you by LifeSpring Church, and they would like to operate a church within the B3 Highway Entrance Business Zoning District. The location is the shopping mall next to Office Max, or it's part of the Office Max shopping mall, but that's a separate property. It's at 1250 North Brightleaf Boulevard. Owner is Tribeca Properties. There's a couple outlots, Applebee's and Hardee's. I think it's Hardee's or is it Arby's? Hardee's on Brightleaf Boulevard. So Applebee's and Hardee's are to the north, and that is B3 Highway Business. To the south is heavy industrial. It's a railroad and vacant heavy industrial land. To the west is B3 Business with Office Max and Lowe's Home Improvement. And to the east is a R8 residential single-family district. Again, we're talking about a 2.5 acre parcel. This is the half of the property next to Office Max. We just went through this, the supplementary standards now pertaining to this application. Again, I'm not going to go through them since we just reviewed them in depth, but these are, in a sense, standards to which we have to hold this special use permit to, okay? So we need to look at each one of these, and your findings of fact should reflect both the supplementary standards and, in a sense, the findings of fact for a special use permit. Whether for or against, the statements should pertain to these different categories as to why you would approve or deny. So staff's analysis of the current application is that the shopping mall consists of two lots, a 6-unit, 8,400 square foot shopping strip mall and a 23,000 square foot Office Max. Those are the two buildings. They share 174 parking stalls currently. The 6-unit mall has 73 of the parking stalls. Office Max has 101 stalls. The sanctuary is planned for an occupancy of 176 seats, which would equal to 59 parking stalls per our standard. All combined, the required parking for church and retail would be 188 parking stalls. Office Max and Papa John's do not utilize their available parking. They just don't draw much traffic at any one given time. They have light traffic throughout the day, but they're not a heavy demand traffic attractor. So regardless of the future use of the remaining 1,400 square foot units, there's just adequate parking on the site. The site is well parked. You could even have another fairly demanding use in the remaining tenant spaces, and you'd still have far more parking than you need during business hours. The church will utilize the parking primarily on Sunday mornings when Office Max is closed. So it will not have any impact on, as it is today, there will be no change for the Office Max, for instance. The space is empty now. The church will be occupied there, and essentially the space will be empty pretty much by the time Office Max opens on a Sunday. Staff concludes then there's adequate parking in the shopping mall for the church and the adjacent retail. Traffic impacts on local roads. The church will not significantly increase traffic on local roadways in a residential district. This is on a highway. The parking lot for the shopping mall has direct access to Brightleaf Boulevard, which is a DOT highway. Vehicular and pedestrian impact on adjacent commercial. The commercial area intended for retail with each leasable space attracting pedestrian and vehicle traffic from each other. Papa John's and Office Max generate little foot traffic or vehicle traffic currently. There are long-standing vacancies in the mall. The church will bring to life 4 of the 6 retail spaces, but mostly on Sunday mornings when the retail is closed or not busy. Essentially, not much change for the existing retail. Therefore, locating a church in a shopping mall will not be a detriment to existing retail. It's the status quo as it is now. The church in the shopping mall may discourage other business to locate in the shopping mall moving forward. However, there will not be a substantial decrease to commercial traffic within the area because it's already depleted, essentially. Orderly development of the surrounding property. The commercial area is fully developed. I mean, it's been developed for 20 years at least, and it's had vacancies for many years. The location of a church in the shopping mall will not impede the normal and orderly development of the area. And then the finding of fact for special use permits are as follows. Number one, staff believes the church will not be a detriment to the public health, safety, or general welfare. We do believe, it says the shopping mall was intended for retail purposes with each leasable space attracting traffic, both pedestrian and vehicular, from one another. That was expressed by the business owner who came up earlier. But the existing retail uses, Papa John's and Office Max, are generally low traffic users, not generating high volumes of vehicles or pedestrians. The shopping mall has had vacancies for quite some time. The church will bring to life 4 to 6 spaces, but mostly on Sundays when the retail is closed or not busy. Therefore, locating the church in the shopping mall will not be a detriment to the existing retail. Locating a church in the shopping mall may discourage other businesses to locate in the shopping mall, but overall, there will not be a substantial decrease in traffic in the area, and therefore it's in harmony. That's staff's interpretation. The third one, the commercial area is fully developed and has had vacancies for many years. The location of a church in the shopping mall will not impede the normal and orderly development of the area. Adequate utilities and parking exist on the property for the proposed use. There's adequate means of ingress and egress to the site from the DOT highway. All the regulations will have been conformed with once they go through the site plan or zoning process. It conforms to plans for both 7 and 8. And with that, staff is recommending approval of the special use permit, SP 1808, with the following condition, that the sanctuary be limited to no more than 176 seats. The reason for that is because with 176 seats, given the requirement for parking for all uses, they can't grow anymore if those other uses need their allotted parking. Okay, so if they ended up being a situation, let's say it's Christmas and Office Max all of a sudden does have a lot of users, we don't want to steal their parking with more seats if they had extended hours or whatever it could be. Just keeping them to the allotted parking. And with that, staff would take any questions that you might have.
I have a question for the planning director. Is the current buffers adequate based on the applicant's request?
I didn't analyze the current commercial district's buffers to current code, but I would say, I don't know which UDO that would have been developed under, but our standards have actually gone down from what was in the past, so I would, without analyzing it, I would say yes.
Any other questions at this time? So is the applicant present? Yes. Do you agree with the evidence and the facts that our planning director just presented?
Yes, sir.
Do you have any other additional information you'd like to present this time?
Outside of the public comment section.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it nails the time for you as the applicant to speak. So if you do, you'll come forward.
Dylan Shoup, 123 Phillips Drive, Benson. I actually prefer to speak now because I saw that the other one is limited to 3 minutes and pastors can't.
Yeah. This is your time to speak.
Great.
If it's on this matter.
Cool. Generally, First off, thank you all so much for dealing with this issue. Clearly, there's some different opinions on different sides, and much like in church, sometimes you have to wade through it, and I appreciate that from you guys. Just in general, from a practical standpoint, for us, this would be a tremendous move for us, because currently right now we're portable. We set up, we tear down every single weekend, which is labor intensive. But we really do think that moving into this particular place is going to benefit that area certainly. We don't have we've exchanged some emails with the general managers of Office Max, Papa John's, et cetera, Applebee's before they unfortunately moved on. All those folks want us there because they believe our presence there will increase their business, and that makes sense because currently just Papa John's is there, and the only folks coming to Papa John's are people ordering online, et cetera. So we think it'll actually help businesses there, which would be good. To speak to the parking thing, if parking ever did become an issue, we do have permission from, I think it's the Johnston County Animal Hospital, as well as Hardee's, to use their excess parking because they have some parking that's either beyond what's required by the code, or in the case of Johnston County Animal Hospital, they have 13 spaces that they just don't use because they're closed on Sunday morning. So if parking ever did become an issue, we could add some spots. There's space behind the building that we could add some spots. And that was one of our biggest concerns, even in looking at the space, because the parking requirements for churches is pretty tremendous. But there's ample parking and that sort of thing. This is going to help us as a church in the sense that it gives us a base of operations, especially in a way to serve the community. And that's really our heart in this whole thing. One of the things we like to say is that we're a church that's for Smithfield. We believe that the local church should have such an impact on a community that a community really would mourn its loss. One of the things that we were able to spearhead last year was an effort called Generosity Feeds, which provided meals to children over Christmas break, and that we partnered with local schools to do that. And having a base of operations to be able to do more of that similar thing would certainly be tremendous. It's going to help us in terms of ministering to the next generation, which is certainly a benefit for the town. In fact, we have 3 principals here, Ms. Laura Mackey, Mr. David Allen, Ms. Heather Anders, that are all here in support of us because we've done a lot with their schools, and this is going to help us make an even greater impact there. Mr. Lee knows that we've been over in East Smithfield consistently even since before we were started, and having a permanent space is going to give us a chance just to do more because portable or we're limited. In a permanent spot, we can do a tremendous amount of good for the community, and that's really what we want. We want to see Smithfield thrive. That's our heart, and we believe us moving there is certainly going to accomplish that. And we do thank you guys just from the bottom of our hearts for considering our application.
Any questions at this time for the applicant?
I do have one. Could you address the council on what your operating hours are generally going to be?
We start at 10 o'clock, and I preach for 30 minutes, and we get done at 11. Does nobody believe that?
Since this is recorded, Pastor William, did you see this? That's my minister.
Is that just one day a week that y'all have to?
That's just Sunday right now, but again, we'll be able to do some different things throughout the week. That wouldn't require a tremendous amount of parking, really. For example, student ministry, you're dealing with middle schoolers and high schoolers. Their parents are going to drop them off. Not really stay there, really. Hopefully they'll go to Hardee's or whatever restaurant moves into Applebee's. We already have Chick-fil-A, so nothing comes to mind that would be quite that awesome. Yes, generally speaking, Sunday morning we start at 10 o'clock. We'll be done at 11, generally speaking.
I think 176 seats would be enough, or that kind of limit you right off the gate, or what do you?
Not so much because, and thank you for asking the question, because this is something I kind of geek out on a little bit. But one of the interesting things about church seating capacity is a general rule of thumb is when you're 80% full, you're full. So when you say, okay, you got 170, or just for sake of round numbers, say if you had 200 seats, you're never going to want more than 160 people in that room anyway. Because when you think about it, for example, if you go to a movie theater, I don't want to get cuddly with somebody, unless it's maybe my wife, right? But if I go in and I sit down, and the same applies to any assembly use. If I go in, I'm not looking to sit right next to somebody. I want space, right? And so that same thing applies to church, which is why there's this rule that typically if you're 80%, you're full. you're full, and then you have to get creative, like either add a second service or that sort of thing, because so with 176, you're never going to have that number in there really, because of like the 80% rule or whatever. So I'm glad you asked the question, because
So if you were to go to a second service, would you back your times up so you wouldn't interfere with Office Max? Or?
We would chew on that. Well, and again, this is, to go back to the 80% idea, say hypothetically, if you said, okay, well, we're going to do, 9 o'clock and 10:30, for instance. Okay, well, 10:30 obviously bleeds into 11:30. Office Max doesn't have a tremendous amount of traffic during that time, generally speaking anyway. But the other side of that, to go back to some math here, if you say, we've got permission from Hardee's to use, I think, 7 of their spots, and then Johnson County Animal Hospital to use 13 of their spots. So if you say, okay, that's 20 spots, and I think the number from that we'd be like permitted to have, I think, was like 25 spots or something like that. And so if you look at that, if you say, okay, that's 25 spots, that's 45 spots multiplied by 3, that's 135. That's right at kind of your 80% threshold anyway. So even if you were into those hours a little bit, you've got adequate parking, because when we get 80% full, we're not going to try to add any more people, because you end up with social strangulation and you end up losing people in a lot of ways. Does that make sense?
Where do y'all meet at now?
Okay.
Where do y'all have your service at now? At the college?
Johnson Community College, yes, sir.
So how many members do you have at present?
Right now, we average about 65 adults on a Sunday morning, and like 23-ish, actually it's like 67 and 21, 67 adults, 21 kids, so about 88 human beings at church on Sunday morning.
So your plans, are you leasing the space now?
Yes, sir. Well, no, at JCC?
No, where you would like to go.
We would be leasing that space, yes, sir. Our lease agreement is contingent on what happens tonight.
How long is the lease for?
5 years and 9 months.
What did you say did you say you talked to Office Max people too?
Mm-hmm.
The manager, what did they say?
That would be more of a question for Pastor Mark back there. Yes, please do, because you talked to him.
Did you get sworn in? Then
So come to the front.
he'll take care of that.
Swear you in.
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, over the past month, one of our things.
Will state your name and address and your affiliation.
Yes, Mark Stevens, address 2186 Progressive Church Road, Princeton, North Carolina. And I am one of the pastors, executive pastor of Lifespring Church. So one of our great concerns when we move to any area is that we want to help benefit the local business community. And so I went around over the past month and met with each business owner that owns every adjacent business. Office Max, Lowe's, Applebee's manager before they closed, Johnson Animal Hospital, Hardee's manager, Papa John's, and all of them I have letters of support from all of them, well, almost all of them, a couple of them, Applebee's, never got to send theirs, but everyone is open arms and would love Lifespring Church to be in that district, specifically Office Max, because Sunday is, he said, their slowest day of the week. And so us bringing a lot of foot traffic back there would be really helpful for their business.
Thank you much.
Anyone else in the audience wishing to speak for or against this?
Thank you, Council. My name is Jason Bullock, 190 Narren Road in Selma.
Been sworn?
Yes, sir. Just a little history about me. A little bit Mayor Pro Tem Scott knows. 10 years ago, I attended another church, and I was really burned by that church. It wasn't a good relationship. And because of that, I didn't lose my faith in God, but I lost my faith in churches. Until about 2.5 years ago, I met with Pastor Dylan. And then I, of course, met with Pastor Mark and then Pastor David. And for a church that's less than 100, I've seen it do incredible things. Not only restore my faith in churches, but see what a church that truly cares about the community can do. In my 20-some years of being a Christian, I've never seen a church this small take on an endeavor such as feeding 10,000 kids. But this church was able to do it. I've never seen a church more willing to go out into the community and help develop real relationships with people. Doesn't matter their past, doesn't matter what they did on the Saturday night before, doesn't matter about their race or their gender. They truly care about the community. And I know you said in the invocation that you want what's best for not only this town, but for what's the best for the kingdom. And I do believe that approving the special use permit will be the best thing for the citizens of this town and for the kingdom. And that's all I got to say.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else wishing to speak for or against this? Please come.
Ann Ernest, 13 Dale Street. I'm the director for In His Hands Pregnancy Support Center here in Smithfield. And I just want to speak about Life Spring Church. They have come into the community. I have seen them work with so many different organizations, helping so many people. They have been to the pregnancy center. They have done things like buy gift bags for our ladies for Christmas. They pampered them. They did a day of pampering. They come there. They help us maintain the property. They've just done so many different things, and I see them all over the community. I mean, they feed people. They help people. They help the rescue mission. They help all kinds of organizations. They just don't stay in the church. They're outside of the church. They call us all the time, wanting to know how they can help. And it's not just one time a year. I mean, it's all year long, and they are constantly there helping us. And I just think that Life Spring having a permanent location here in Smithfield will be good for Smithfield and for the citizens of Smithfield, because they are really here to make a difference. And they are touching lives, and they are making a difference for Smithfield. So that's all I got to say.
Thank you. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Zach Carscadden, 202 Garner Drive, Smithfield. Just want to say thank you all for the long hours on the UDO committee. I know just how much time that was spent, and you know, even though tonight, you know, we talked about that at length, I still, you know, I think this special use permit, you know, would be great for Smithfield. Like Dylan said, we're going into 4 vacant, you know, vacant areas, bringing life to, you know, really an area of Smithfield that hasn't had anything in there in a while. 2 of them, I don't know what was there at all. There's no signage, there's no nothing. They've been vacant for a long time, and the other 2 that were taken over have been vacant for a while as well. And so, you know, I think it's a good thing for the community. Like we said, the Office Max is already, you know, signed on. They're excited for us as well. And if you could just think about it, I mean, you know, like Applebee's left, and you know, they've got 4 vacant in one spot, Papa John's and another vacant on the other side. I mean, so it's just, you know, it's Papa John's and Office Max, and Applebee's is gone, and I mean, it's just vacant all the way around. And so, you know, if this is approved, we can go in there, you know, revitalize that area, give them foot traffic on other times, and we're going to be having stuff during the week, like Dylan said. So we will be there, you know, not like normal business hours, but we will be there during the week. And so, again, you know, I think this is a good thing for us, and you know, really appreciate y'all's time. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other questions for the council?
I move we close the public hearing.
Second.
Close the public hearing in a second. All in favor? Any other discussion from the council at this time?
Yeah, I just like this was like thing Dylan, Light Spring, actually had a chance to meet Dylan, actually before, they even came, to JCC, and, you know, they've definitely, done a whole lot for East Smithfield, out of Smith College Park, in the neighborhood, the 2 times they went out and cleaned up and picked up trash on Saturday, they fed a lot of kids, and, you know, I think y'all been a blessing, and I do think, you know, once you do have a permanent place and you're not moving in and moving out every Sunday and over to JCC, and I think there could be more manpower, more strength that y'all have to do more. I certainly like to thank you all for all that you've done and that y'all all do. So thank you, Dylan, and Light Spring.
Discussion from the council.
Yeah, I want to say that I said this before after reading the application. And as you know, obviously, I'm not in favor of taking retail space. But I did say that if we approved it, I would have a hard time not approving the special use permit. Because if we change the UDO to allow them to do that, I don't know of anybody else, based on what they're doing here, that would not justify them doing it. So, I mean, you know, I would say that, in my opinion is, I think they meet everything that we have specified on the special use permit. So I would be I'm just saying, I would be fully in support of moving forward. I don't like retail space being taken, but that ship has sailed, so.
So I do have just a couple of points, and again, I'll preface this with, I am all in favor of churches. Take it the wrong way. But I do have a couple of concerns here. And I just want you gentlemen to understand that up here. Churches do a wonderful thing. Churches want to grow, and that's what it's all about. And I'd love to see every single church in Smithfield just bursting at the seams and every pew full. Right? I don't know one church that does not want that. 176. Right? I heard the one minister or someone say that 106 or whatever is that magical number. But if a person or parishioner comes up, I don't know of any church worth their salt that's going to turn anyone away. Keep that in mind. Okay? 176 could grow, and that's exactly what we want it to do, is to grow much, much larger than 176. And I hope that you do, right, as a church. I would love that, and I appreciate every single thing that the church does. I love to see people involved in our community. And if I have organizations that are pushing it, more so. And I definitely want to thank the church, first and foremost, for everything that you do in our community, all parts of our community. We totally appreciate it. But I say this just to make sure that the council understands what could happen, right? 5-year lease. Certainly hope that the church grows within that 5-year time. Special use will run with the land. Okay? So if my concern is parking and what it does to that traffic. I've heard that Office Max is only open at noon. But I've also heard 2 people stand up here and say that there are going to be other activities throughout the week. While I was sitting up here, I pulled up the website, and one of the things listed on the website is get piggy with it. Okay, it sounds like a great thing, but it's all-day barbecue. It's inflatables, great for the community, right? But you put that into a congested retail area, and it's going to be a nightmare from a traffic and a parking stand. We say by our own facts that there's 174 total spots within that within that shopping center. 73 would be required by our ordinance for the church, which leaves 101. Okay? By our own facts, Office Max would require 115. So that's more than the 101 that remains. Again, I say this not just from an Office Max standpoint. Gentlemen, it runs with the land. Okay? Just like Applebee's went out of business, Office Max could go out of business, and another retail establishment could go in there, which would draw a lot more traffic based on the square footage of that building than Office Max. And at different hours, which possibly could mean open during church hours. Okay? So you have to remember that as well as you sit up here and make your decision. What we decide now is not just for Office Max. It's not just for Hardee's. The other mention was that they had talked to Applebee's. Right? Well, Applebee's is now gone. We have talked to Johnston Animal Hospital. We're getting ready to burn down 3 houses in just a couple of weeks so that Johnston Animal Hospital can move and build a new establishment. I can only think that Johnston Animal Hospital and the doctor will put that property up for sale. I don't know that for sure, but if they do, what is the new owner going to do? Are they going to allow that additional parking or not? Again, just things to consider, right, as you're making your decision. That is my concern, is the traffic, unlike retail businesses also, where retail is open throughout the day and you have people coming and going just like at Oak City downtown. They don't all come at one time. They come at different times. With a church, you're primarily looking at 176 176 possibly coming at one time and all leaving at one time. As the minister said, he preaches for 30 minutes and it's done. Now hopefully, those people, if their business is open, will then visit those businesses, right? And not all leave at one time. But there is that potential for 176 people to leave at one time, coming out of one entrance. I've seen it. I've gone by the churches where they have either volunteers or parishioners because of the traffic, or sheriff's deputies standing out directing traffic because it's an impact, it's a danger. Okay? I say this not to be against the church or anything. I'm for the ordinance change that we did to allow it. But I want you to consider the parking here, not based off of what is there. You have to remember it runs with the land, and we do not know what's going to happen. I find it, if approved, I think as a town, it would be very difficult for us to start going in total cars and putting restrictions on that and so forth. So I say that just to consider this from this location standpoint. I agree with the amendment change that we did earlier, and I think they should be allowed. But you also have to consider all of these.
To address some of your concerns, I know we've closed the public hearing, but the site plan reflects a pretty vacant area around the back, perhaps. Definitely.
And I don't know, I mean, yeah.
And if they outgrow their space, I think they'll be looking to move elsewhere.
Did anybody address Lowe's for any of their parking?
Public hearing's closed.
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, there is a provision in the code, if they do get permission from property owners within 400 feet, they can utilize that parking. So I guess that'd be a discretionary call on my part. Would that require an amendment to the conditional use to allow more seating, or as long as they have the parking? To me, as an administrator, I would say they've addressed the concerns because they've now, adjusted their parking requirements. The condition is really pertaining to what available parking they have today. So I would be amenable as an administrator saying if you've got permission, written permission from adjacent property owners, you could grow your sanctuary accordingly as long as you've got that written permission. But addressing the access onto highways, I mean, if there is a legitimate public safety concern by the council could condition the permit that there be some kind of traffic control at the end of ceremonies.
And we do have, and there is a stoplight there.
It's a reasonable health safety condition that could be placed on any use.
So the question you had related to the, because you said that obviously the special use permit goes with the land, but is there not a way to put a condition on that also, though? So that the special use permit, of course, only applies to the church that's there, right?
Right, it goes.
Because it's for the church, so it applies to the church.
Well,
the church is not the building, though, you understand?
It applies to the use of the property.
Right.
So
if another church came in there, they could continue.
As long as it wasn't a vacancy for, I believe it's a year. I think our code has a year vacancy.
So but things we can put conditions on the special use permit. Whatever conditions we want to put on there, is that not correct?
They have to address reasonable concerns, such
like
as
you had on
health safety.
Like this statement here says that sanctuary be limited more than 160 seats.
That's a reasonable condition, given the fact that there's only so much parking.
Right, so we can also limit the number of parking spaces that can be used, correct? If they go over that limit, then they can have their special use permit removed.
Yeah, if they violate the conditions of any conditional use permit, or if the conditions are violated, staff can bring the conditional use permit back up to the council for.
Which would then require them to make some
revocation.
decisions about potentially moving to a larger space.
Correct.
So we can limit it to whatever we believe. We don't have to go to 176. We can say 150. Matter of fact, you said the maximum capacity will be 160. If you have 200, it's going to be 160. So 176 times 80% is going to be what? My math on top of my head is a little low, but if it was 180, 160, so we're looking about 150. So we say 150 people. We can say limit to 150 people. Once the church goes over 150 people, that's fine. They lose their permit if they go over 150 people. We could do that. If that's our concern is about parking spaces, because they don't have 150 people, they're not going to need excessive cars if the maximum attendance is only 150 people. That's not an occasional, now let's face it, they may have a revival or whatever, that have 200 people. I don't mean that. We're talking consistently week after week, once their attendance goes up to that level.
I don't think it'd be reasonable to put a restriction on the church less than 176, because that is how much currently exists on the site if they were a retail use or a church use adjacent to the existing retail. So they fit into the total amount of parking that's there. But if you were to restrict them artificially at a much lower number, I think it's not necessarily justifiable. So I don't think it's a fair treatment.
Except they made the comments that 80% was full.
But I don't think there's any legitimate concern, because there's enough parking for them to grow to that 176 people.
So the allotted parking that they have, not counting Papa John's parking.
Right.
Because they're doing something.
For their four rentable spaces with the parking requirement for churches, that's how much sanctuary space they can fill up, based on the allotted parking that's for those spaces.
But let me be clear, and Mr. Attorney, please correct me if I'm wrong. I hear what you said, but I think the council could place a restriction on it, and if the church's agrees to it, if it's 150, then I don't see anything wrong with that.
If they're agreeable.
Is that a fair statement?
That's fair.
If they're agreeable.
If the church says, yeah, we're fine with 150 here.
Well, I would say, if you're going to address Mr. Barber's concern, if you're going to get to 150, you need that 176. And as far as from a seating capacity, like you say, well, we're going to restrict it to 150 seats, then you lower that number that realistically you're going to have in the report like 120.
So it sounds like it's already been addressed.
I think just leave it like it is.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
We hadn't even gotten to that part in the issue though. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion, if I may.
Sir.
I move that we approve findings of fact 1, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 as written. I move we approve finding of fact 2 with these following changes. Are you ready, Shannon? This shopping mall was intended for retail purposes, with each leasable space attracting traffic, both pedestrian and vehicular, from one use to another. The existing retail uses, Papa John's and Office Max, are generally low-traffic uses, do not generate high volumes of vehicular or pedestrian traffic, and approve LifeSpring being their neighbor. This shopping mall has had vacancies for quite a long period of time. The church will bring to life 4 of the 6 retail spaces, but mostly on Sunday mornings when retail is closed or not busy. Therefore, locating the church in this shopping mall will not be a detriment to existing retail. I propose that the motion includes deleting the next sentence in its entirety, because I don't believe there's any evidence of that. And then the final sentence, overall, there will not be a substantial decrease to commercial traffic within the area and is therefore in harmony with the area. The change to finding of fact number 3 would be in the second sentence, the location of a church in this shopping mall. So be changing the "the" to "this."
Second.
Get that, Madam Clerk. You repeat that, sir. Good thing it's recorded. Okay. All right, so I do have a motion and a second by Mayor Scott, is that correct? Motion and a second, all in favor? Aye. And all opposed? Motion carries.
I'd like to make a motion related to the conditions. I'll make the motion that we approve the request as stated as you're with the following limitations. No more than 176 seats.
Back there. A motion to approve with no more than recommended 176 seats. I do have a second by Councilman Lee, I think. Correct, sir? Second, all in favor? Aye. All opposed? Congratulations. Now fill it up. Come back. Okay, gentlemen, let's see, where are we?
171.
Oh, yes, 171 in your agenda package. Okay, the next public hearing is ZA-18-05, the town of Smithfield. This is not a quasi-judicial hearing, so therefore no one needs to be sworn in. The Planning Department is requesting an ordinance amendment to the Town of Smithfield UDO, Article 10, Part 3, regulations for signs to allow for on-site high-rise identification signs on properties located within the B3 zoning district and that are within 660 feet of the Interstate 95 right-of-way. Do I have a motion to open the public hearing?
So moved, Mayor.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Stephen, turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. This is a staff-driven text amendment. We had an application for a hotel in town, and we realized we have no allowance for signage on their site within 660 feet of the right-of-way, I-95 right-of-way. The high-rise signs, the purpose of this would be to allow high-rise signs to allow quality branded restaurants, hotels, and retailers to advertise their locations along I-95 to ensure the viability of our corridor. History is the hotel developer recently inquired about high-rise signs, as I said, and we realized that they were eliminated with the UDO update, the allowance for them. The state does not allow outdoor advertising pole signs near the interstate, but does allow high-rise signs. There's an exception. If it's an on-site advertising sign for the property to which is advertising, it's allowed. And I think with our UDO ordinance, the two kind of got melded into one and just eliminated. That's how we understand it. it had happened. Currently, there are 11 high-rise signs previously permitted under the old UDO sign code, so it's been standard practice for years, and again, it's not a restriction by the state, unlike advertising signs. The old code allowed a maximum height of 100 foot, 400 square foot per side sign, single tenant, on single tenant developments within 660 feet of the corridor with a CUP, and now it's an SUP. The minimum height of 50 feet was added to high-rise signs requirements to control confusion between ground-mounted signs and high-rise signs. So we're going to maintain that with our revised ordinance. High-rise signs are to advertise activities conducted on the property to which it is located only. So not advertising off-site content. An expedited administrative approval process for high-rise signs. It'd be staff approved. I think in the past it was a conditional use permit, if I believe, under the old code. Single tenant developments to qualify for a sign, a single tenant development to qualify for one of the high-rise business ID signs if they were located within a B3 district and within 660 feet of the interstate. We would have a maximum of 100 feet and a minimum of 50 feet for that sign, up to 400 square feet per side, ground-mounted, freestanding, and monopole design only. High-rise signs can be in addition to other allowable signs. Existing high-rise signs to be repaired or replaced if substantial damage occurs. The proposed ornament would also create a definition of high-rise business identification signs and provide a photograph of a typical installation. Because they are permitted for on-site advertising only, high-rise signs are not affected by the state of North Carolina's prohibition on outdoor advertising, as I said earlier. So this map here shows where they would be allowed. So as I said, only in the B3 districts within 660 feet of the interstate. Staff believes the amendment is consistent with the comprehensive plan and the comprehensive plan. The text amendment is consistent with the UDO, and it's essentially removing inconsistencies within the UDO. And it would be reasonable in the public interest. The Planning Department and the Planning Board recommend the Council approve the proposed amendment to Article 10 of the UDO and recommends that the Town Council approve a statement declaring the request consistent with the comprehensive plan and that it's reasonable in the public interest. And do you have any questions?
You mentioned in there about replacing damaged signs. If the sign is constructed with telephone poles and it's damaged, can they replace it with telephone poles? They got to put the one pole up. Or is that's more related to billboard than this?
I would have to go back and review the sign code in general, but the sign code has specific requirements for replacement of signs. Non-conforming signs can be replaced. In the current Article 9 addresses non-conforming signs. So if it is non-conforming like you're saying and doesn't meet the current code, it would just have to follow Article 9.
Because we got one at 8th and Market that's been damaged before and been put back together.
Can't be put back together? Has been.
It's still, to me, it could be an improvement if it was a single pole design versus telephone pole type. That may not even apply. It's not in that district.
Just standing here without looking into it further, I believe Article 9 allows the restoration of non-conforming signs. And that's outside of the sign code. That's in the non-conforming section of the code.
Or the density limitations. In other words, how many signs go at that one of these commercial subdivisions and have 25 signs right up next to each other, those are tall signs?
There is not that restriction, but as talking to Mark about this when he drafted the ordinance, these are very expensive signs, They probably wouldn't build them unless it was really beneficial and provided visibility. And if it was visibly conflicted by another sign, they probably wouldn't go through the effort.
I think the old code had density limitations, didn't it?
Those are usually with the advertising signs. The outdoor advertising, there were limits.
Just
like within
identification.
so many feet between signs along the freeway. The problem with that, then you're inadvertently limiting one person's right to advertise on their property from another.
Yeah, I was thinking you would be limiting them to one of these multi-unit subdivision signs, I mean, where you have 15 businesses on one big sign.
These are independent standalone signs for the businesses, right?
Correct.
Like you just gave an example in your picture of the travel lodge or whatever.
Exactly.
They're not electronic signs that are retailing coming across, they're just independent signs that let people know that the retail business is there.
Yes.
I'm in favor of retail businesses.
Anyone in the audience who would like to speak for or against this?
Good evening. Tony Nixon, 8 Cedar Drive. I just have one or two questions, I guess. I think we kind of addressed the signage issue at one point in the past, and we were talking about sign pollution. And we've got quite a bit of space right there on the outlet center in terms of putting the signage up. And I guess one of my biggest questions would be, would the type of signage, what type of lighting would be allowed with that? Are we looking at the digital lighting that illuminates greatly? Is that kind of catered in there, the type of lighting?
I don't believe digital lighting is allowed. I guess I'd have to go back and research that to be 100% certain. I don't think this is allowing anything that's, if it's, whatever's allowed currently wouldn't change with this type of sign. So I don't have all the answers to your questions.
So that would be one of my major concerns, is the type of lighting on those signs, because, you know, you got a lot of traffic, not just on 95, but also on the service road there. And, you know, signage can be somewhat of a distraction to drivers if it's too illuminated. So I would, you know, caution that we be very mindful of the type of signage that goes there, the type of lighting that would go there also. Okay, and also with the density of the signage, we've got signs that would represent what the businesses are, but also advertising signs. So is there some type of stipulation in the ordinance that defines the space between advertising and the business itself?
There's outdoor advertising signs there. Essentially, there's no more that can be allowed, the billboard type of sign. There is no restriction on if there's a billboard and someone wants to advertise a hotel next door on their site. There's no restriction on distance.
So, you know, basically you could get into a situation where you've got a sign and 25 feet away you've got another sign that could be in various heights of that 100 to whatever the maximum. Yeah. So, I mean, it can get into a conglomeration or a hodgepodge of signage out there. So I would ask that you be very mindful about the type of signage that you do allow in that very dense area. That's it.
That's the good point is there a way that we can, in this ordinance, can we make it a standard height? That they all have to be this height? So that there is uniformity and not, like I said, like he was saying, the hodgepodge, the different types of, you know, up and down and everywhere. Is there a way we can have, because I think uniformity, if you have uniformity, then it doesn't look bad. It looks like it was planned. If you got hodgepodge, it looks like somebody throw some signs out there. You know? And I don't think that's what our intent is. We want to advertise to people that are driving down the highway so they stop in our community and go to our retail shops. But we want, and stay at our hotels. But again, we want to make sure that we have a nice looking place for them to come out and do it at. And not, so is there a...
Mr. Mayor and Council, there actually are 16 existing signs in that area already, and they probably are a variety of heights and looks and various illumination levels. I think trying to create a single standard at this point might be too late. It's just my personal opinion, because I know they vary in height and in shape and.
But you can set the standard going forward.
We could.
You can't do anything about the pass, I understand that.
Right.
The ship doesn't sail. But for the new ships that's coming out of the dock, we can define what type of ship it looks like.
We absolutely can. We absolutely can, but we do, I'm just saying there's a critical mass already out there that's
Yeah.
quite a bit different. And again, I guess, whatever the council's pleasure, I think the landowners probably would be happy with the highest amount of signage, but, right now we allow between 50 and 100. I think whatever the council's pleasure, they would probably live with. And to address Mr. Nixon's other comment and also Bob's comment about spacing between existing billboards or spacing between existing signs, I don't really know how to address that. I mean, to restrict them with a distance could inadvertently be hindering, one person's marketable property versus another one just because somebody else got there first. I don't really know how to address that.
And again, to what Mr. Barber was saying, though, I mean, the council can make whatever those restrictions are, because if we let this signage get out of control, that's a problem. And I've seen in other areas, there's some type of standard signage where towns or municipalities have employed basic heights for signs. Maybe we need to address the signage again, exiting 95 or whatnot, to direct tourists and that sort of thing to the businesses. Maybe that's another area to address, but just to stick, signs up here and there and all over the place, it really, what does that say about the uniformity or just the appearance of the town? That is our first entrance area, and that's something that really should be consistent.
Might take it back, could you take it back, you think, and get a comparison of different towns up and down 95?
I know Mark did look at some other ordinances. Typically, those distance requirements had to do with billboards.
Yeah, because the state does that.
Yeah. I mean, we could go back and look at it. There's no hurry on this ordinance, and I think the clerk said it was actually, the draft of the ordinance is omitted from the packet. Is that true? Okay, if that's the case, the council doesn't have a draft in front of them anyway, which would be my apologies. I was unaware. But I know what, I could come back and address the digital question, and I guess I'd be looking for some comments from the council about if you want to have a uniform height, what height would you want? Because it can be whatever the council feels is appropriate.
Perhaps we can look at what's already there.
100
The consistency of the heights that are there. I think most of them are probably within a variation of a certain height.
Current passcode is between 50 and 100, and I think what you see out there is probably a mix of each. We could go back and look at permits and figure out the exact height of each of those 16 and come up with the average height, just as a way to arrive at a height.
We think to consider that as we're thinking about this. These signs are extremely expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Any retail business may not want, if we say 100 feet, okay, that's the magical number. Every sign has to be 100 feet. Retail business may not be that. Allow it. Uniform, it could, but it's just they're extremely expensive. You're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars for these signs. Wire a business to put a certain height up, and they may not be that hotel that needs the 100-foot sign. Right? Wire it. Just again, something to consider.
So when you're doing your, since we're obviously not gonna, we're gonna have to move this on to next time, since we don't have the information. The question, is there a way you can also give us some estimated cost? If we're putting something upon people too, it'd be nice to know what the cost is. From the minimum's 50 feet and the maximum's 100, you know, what would be the cost? So we know also what we're asking our businesses, if they're gonna do it, what their expenses are gonna be. Because maybe we say, okay, well, it's tax expense, some can do that. We just say, well, there's not much difference between 50 and 75 feet as far as cost is concerned. So we say, okay, because you can do a 50 foot, you can do a 75 foot. Yeah, I'm just saying, we don't know until we get the prices. So I think that's something we need to come back to us.
I can do that.
So I guess the question would be, do we recommend that we table this until next meeting? Is that would be the appropriate thing to do?
Second.
So before we get there, anyone else wishing, this is a public hearing, guys. Anyone else wishing to speak on this matter besides Mr. Nixon at this time? Okay. Now, do I have a motion to close?
Motion we table it.
Well, I need a motion to close the public hearing.
Okay, we're closed. I'm okay to make a motion we close the public hearing.
Second. I have a motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor? Okay.
I motion we table it until next meeting.
A motion to table it and a second to the next meeting. Who seconded that motion?
Whole council.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right. We will table this item. We'll move on to the next public hearing. This is on page 181 of your packet. This is a quasi judicial hearing, so anyone wishing to speak on this matter needs to be sworn in. SUP 18-09 Market Street Automotive. Anyone wishing to speak for or against this?
Please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly,
The applicant, is the applicant here? The applicant is not here.
do you solemnly affirm to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
They used to frequently not show up, and we started encouraging them to show up. People don't naturally understand.
Okay. All right. We will move forward then with SUP-18-09 Market Street Automotive. The applicant is requesting a special use permit to expand an automotive repair shop located on a 42-acre tract of land within a B2 zoning district. The property considered for approval is located on the southwest side of the intersection of East Market Street and South 5th Street. The property is further identified as Johnson County Tax ID 1502503. I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Second, all in favor? Mr. Plan Director, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. The applicant is Will Gainey. He's requesting a special use permit to allow outdoor storage in association with outdoor repair, or auto repair, sorry, it's supposed to be auto repair, on a 0.2 acre parcel in the B2 zoning district. So the location is just down the road here at the corner of 5th and Market Street. It's that sort of antique-looking 1950s two-stall auto repair old gas station across from First Citizens Bank and next to the carpet shop. So First Citizens is across Market Street. The police station sits behind the alley. Hopkins Carpet is sort of to the north, and across the street is Wood Termite and Pest Control Business, which is B2 business. Again, it's a 0.24 acre parcel. It's a pretty small parcel, and its current use is auto repair, and they're going to continue that use. The current building has two pass-through service doors and a small lobby. So facing Market Street are two garage doors. Facing the alley are 2 garage doors. The entire property is impervious. They've paved, the current conditions, it's paved right up to the sidewalks on both sides and then paved up to the alley. So there's no green space except for between the sidewalk and the curbs, where there's not a driveway. There's an existing non-conforming metal carport canopy between the building and Hopkins carpet, which we did make a condition of their variance. They were before the Board of Adjustments last month for a variance, which might be why the applicant's not here. He may be confused about the 2 processes. Regardless, we did put a condition on that variance, but I'm also going to recommend that we put a condition on the special use permit also, just so it shows up regardless, because some of the variance conditions get lost. There's a driveway access to Market Street. It's 45 feet wide. That's the biggest one. And there's a 30-foot and a 10-foot curb cut on 5th Street. And then they have alley access the full width of the property. So it's a lot of access around there. The property width is roughly 80 feet on the Market Street. A condition of the variance approval was also closing the access on 5th Street that's closest to the intersection. I think it'd be also wise to include that condition as a condition of the special use permit, again, so those conditions don't get lost in the future. And that was done for safety reasons, because there's just no distance between the intersection and that driveway. The applicant is proposing 5 parking stalls, including one of them being handicap accessible, and they would be striped. They're proposing a 19.5 by 50-foot screened, fenced vehicle storage area between the new addition and the Hopkins carpet building next door. In a screened enclosure, they can more efficiently squeeze in cars, get more cars into a small space, and that's such a small site. That's the approach they want to do. Otherwise, they'd be required to store their vehicles in striped stalls, which are roughly 9 by 18, eats up space really quick. So through the conditional use or special use permit process, as long as they get that screened area, they can use it for storage. It's out of sight and hopefully out of mind. So finding a fact for this site, I want to back up. The variance they received had to do with their inability to meet the landscaping and buffer yard requirements because of, obviously, they've not existed for years because of the smallness of the site, and also the variance addresses the setback to the alley. They need to be 15 feet from the alley. Hopkins carpet is almost right up to the alley. They're requesting to be, I believe it was like 7 feet from the alley. So just setbacks in the buffering requirements, essentially. First, finding a fact. So the land use, outdoor storage in association with auto repair will be in a paved storage area entirely screened from the public view and located between the 2 structures, therefore not an impact to the public health, safety, or welfare. The land use is an improvement to the existing auto repair business in that the parking will be regulated or limited such that vehicles will need to be either in the building, in the screened area, or in designated parking stalls. So we have much more parking control as a result of this change. The land use will have no impact on the orderly development or improvement to the area. In fact, one of the driveways on 5th Street will be closed, lessening the impact on the normal and orderly development of the district. There are adequate utilities and parking exists and will be provided for. The drainage remains unchanged. They're exempt for any drainage retention currently. Adequate measures have been taken to provide ingress and egress. The driveway on 5th Street closest to Market Street will be closed. Again, that was a safety issue. All regulations will be conformed with the variance, which has been approved. For 7 and 8, the use does conform to plans, current plans. Staff's recommendations for the use is that that the 5 parking stalls be striped according to the lot survey dated on 6/11/18, which I think is in your packet. That the vehicle storage area be fenced and screened from public view. That no more than 5 vehicles be parked outside on the property except for vehicles parked in the screened area. That the metal carport be removed from the property. That is a non-conforming carport. They're not allowed in the B3. It was never permitted. Staff believes it should go. And that the driveway on 5th Street nearest the intersection be closed, and that the landscape boulevard and curbing be restored according to the town of Smithfield standards. And with that, staff is requesting the town council review the petition and make a decision based on a finding of fact.
Number 4 referred to metal carport as portable, or are you talking about the handicap business?
No, it's a metal carport. Portable. Yep.
Why does Fifth Street have to be blocked off? I don't understand.
It's not Fifth Street, it's just the one driveway right at the stop sign, right at the intersection. It's, they've got multiple driveways. I don't know what happened to the site plan in this presentation, but you've got a survey. There's 2 driveways on 5th Street and a large one on Market Street. I don't believe they even use the one on the biggest one on 5th Street.
It's 196.
Yeah.
Well, how's he gonna have to close it? I mean, like a little cable wire, or is he gonna have to put barriers up, or?
No, we're gonna have them restore the curb. Put the curb back. Curb and boulevard back.
Curb back.
And that was a condition of the variance, so we just want to carry that condition forward. And that's really a safety concern because it's difficult. If cars are turning quickly and try to navigate that turn, they could be slowing down while they're still in Market Street. We feel it's a safety issue.
They're expanding this building too.
Correct.
I mean, talking about the, aside from the vehicle storage area, it's going to change the structure.
That's right.
Even on those 3 parking places, the one closest to the road, it looks like a car will be sticking out in the roadway. Or the right of way, I guess. Probably wouldn't be the
I don't
road.
believe that's a parking space. If you count the handicap stall, the other 2 parking spaces, and then there's 2 more under the large canopy.
Okay, so it's
That's the
a
5.
handicap and 2 right there.
That's right.
I got you.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty busy site plan.
It's a very small site.
Outdoor storage is not allowed.
Not without the screened area. Otherwise, they'd have to put it in striped parking stalls. And our practice is typically to limit the number of them. And by putting it in a screened area, they don't really have to adhere to that. It's just as many cars as they could shove in that small area.
That just doesn't really seem consistent with that area, though, to me. Am I missing something? I mean, having cars stored on a site on Market Street?
It would be between the 2 buildings. I mean, they currently have a carport stuffed between those 2 buildings. So this would be an improvement because they currently park cars under there. What they would have is a fenced area, so you wouldn't see the cars. You just see a fence from Market Street, and then all the access to that would be from the alley between the 2 buildings.
That's called a
Yeah, it sounds to me like it, based on, I looked at the drawings, I think it's gonna be a big improvement
Yeah.
to that corner, which actually could add more aesthetics to that particular part of town when they're said and done.
Well, I think the car parking would be more organized.
Yep, but I mean, you're changing the curb, you're putting the curb back up there. I think it's the whole thing, I think it's gonna look a lot better. It's been there forever.
It has.
Yeah, I thought they did car
They
detail.
did do it one time.
It's a garage now.
Yep, they did. That's what I'm saying. It was never really that big of a business, you ask me, but If he's making success out of it where he wants to expand his business to get more work done, it sounds like that's a good thing.
And the two-bay park repair operation is a pretty small operation. And I think it's pretty hard to stage things.
Any other questions at this time? The applicant is not here. So if there's anyone else wishing to speak for or against this matter, come forward at this time. Any other questions from the council? If not, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I move to close.
Second. Second, to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
Page 187, you'll find findings of fact. Pleasure of the board.
Make a motion with Board and Chris, findings of fact 1 through 8, and also with the planning department recommendations 1 through 5.
A second.
Second to approve with the planning department's recommendations. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you, council.
Make a motion to approve the request with the following conditions, 1 through 5.
Motion. Second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Stephen, have you been over these recommended conditions with the applicant?
He saw most of, he saw the two of them, the carport and the curb with the variance. And he already agreed to the parking stalls, so I don't think it should be any surprise to him.
Okay, gentlemen, page 197, agenda package.
Thanks.
We'll move to public hearing number 5. This is not a quasi-judicial hearing, but no need for anyone to be sworn in. This USDA financing application. The purpose of the public hearing is to allow all citizen input on an application to the USDA financing a 100-foot aerial platform ladder fire truck. I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion to open the public hearing.
Greg, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you. I've been told to ask how much time are you giving me?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. I think I can manage that.
Do you have a PowerPoint?
No comment.
I can picture this ladder truck. Just tell me how much and how much we get and how much is financed.
Mayor, councilman, during this current year's budget process, approval was received from council to move forward with the purchase of a 100-foot aerial platform fire truck, estimated to cost $1,126,000 approximately. And to be financed possibly with federal money, in particular through the United States Department of Agriculture. The Department of Agriculture requires a public hearing as part of their consideration process. While the delivery of the truck is still some 16 to 18 months out, it would be good to have USDA as an option for purchasing. At a later date and time, I will receive bids from commercial lenders, as well as what rate will be the final rate from USDA if our application is approved. USDA, unlike commercial banks, offers some advantages such as longer-term financing, they will lock in on the rate at a time the application is approved and guarantee that rate when the loan closes, unlike commercial banks. So there are definitely some pluses with using them. But if the application is approved, it may not be the board's desire to go such long-term financing. We will weigh those odds later. Just for illustrative purposes, you can see that the maximum term would be 20 years. And of course, if we took 20 years at an indicative rate today of 3.88, we would pay for the truck plus half of another truck over that 20-year period. So it may not be the best option, but we want to have options available when that point in time comes. Another reason that we're putting in application with the USDA, and I didn't mention it here, is because it's a kind of a side item. If our application is approved, there may be the opportunity for some grant money, not to exceed $100,000. So if the grant money comes with application approval, then it would offset the cost of the fire truck. So again, we want to put in application just to expand our options. Any questions?
Questions for Greg at this time?
Do they have repayment or early repayment penalty?
There is no early prepayment penalty. There's also no possibility to ever refinance with them. You either pay as agreed or you pay off early.
Anyone in the audience would like to speak on this? Entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move, Mayor.
Second. Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any other questions this time? Hearing is now closed.
No real action for this. You don't need anything, do you? You just need the public hearing.
Public hearing, and I'm
I don't think you really need anything else.
Okay, I didn't know if you needed a motion for us.
Unless you want to
We can do it.
approve the
Approve.
submission,
Yeah, the submission.
since it may be a grant possibility. Usually we get grants submissions.
I'll make a motion that we approve the application process.
With the possibility of
Great.
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Okay, at this time, we have citizens' comments. Anyone wishing to speak during citizens' comments, please come forward and state your name and address for the record, please.
No.
Good afternoon. My name is
Good afternoon, Council.
My name is Irene Shepherd Alford, and I live at 108 Heritage Drive here in Smithfield. And I've been here for 14 years. And during, I guess in 2000, maybe 5, the town of Smithfield came and ran the fire hydrant. And water just gushed my whole yard. And it made a sunk hole in it. So they came back and filled it in with dirt, and then they sowed a little grass. And after that, every year I'm having to sow grass, put in more soil. So I talked to, it was the town mayor before Mr. Scott, town manager. So he said that to compensate me every July the 20th, they would take $100 $120 off my light bill. I have it here in writing. Do y'all want me to read it to you?
Yes.
Okay. It says, "Dear Mrs. Alford, this letter is to serve as written confirmation to our discussion on about July the 20th, 2016, regarding an annual utility credit and the addition of your yard waste charges to your account. As we decided by the time time manager in July of 2015, a $120 credit will be given annually on your utility account at 108 Heritage Drive in Smithfield, North Carolina, for the inconvenience of having a fire hydrant located in the center of your front yard. The town takes no responsibility for this location or the hydrant, and the annual credit is non-transferable, meaning the credit will no longer apply once the property is sold or the utility account is removed from your name. Now, I have bills where from 2000 and...
Ma'am, if you don't mind, who signed that letter?
Greg Salas.
Greg Salas.
That's fine. I mean,
See what happened before Greg was here. It was the other time manager that we had a verbal agreement because I had to keep putting dirt. And I have pictures to show that sinkhole at the fire, where the fire hydrant is. And I've been putting dirt in every year, sowing grass every year, and it dies. So I came up here and I talked to the town manager, and he said they was gonna pay me for that inconvenience for that fire hydrant being in my front yard. It's not on the side, it's in the center of my yard. So when I moved there, I left the house I was staying in, it was so many snakes, so it ran me away. So when I saw this house, I was just glad to get anywhere away from the woods and the snakes. So I didn't pay the fire hydrant no mind until they ran the water. They haven't ran the water but one time, and I've been there 14 years because it all just told me, just had my grass dead and everything. And so one of the town workmen told me, he said, this is too far in your yard in the first place. So I was getting $120, but I was spending that back in every year planting grass. Now I got two kinds of grass in my yard. And so I was told by Micah Scott, the town manager, I confronted him about it, and he let me know, we're not going to do anything about it, and you want to do something about it, you pay $10,000 or $20,000 to have it moved. And nobody don't want to take responsibility. But sitting here listening to all these permits that they got to have, somebody had to give 108 Heritage permit to set that fire hydrant in the middle of the yard. So they don't use it anymore. It's not being flushed out, and it drops down, and it's an ugly eyesore. And I don't think I should have to pay to have this moved, or I shouldn't have to pay every year to make my yard try to look like something, to keep having to buy grass seeds, keep having to haul in dirt, and plus pay my light bill. I don't have that kind of money. So they're not using the fire hydrant because when they run it, all the water's in my yard. So why should I have to try to have it moved? Somebody gave permit for it to be there. And I'm on a fixed income. I'm trying to live the American dream. I keep my yard looking good, but I mean, it's getting tiresome trying to, keep my grass looking good. and putting more grass out there. Now I got two-tone color grass. And I just want to know, something needs to be done about it. They took the 100, Michael Scott, town manager, told me, yeah, right here, says, well, we're gonna take the 120, and we're not gonna do anything about the fire hydrant.
I would like to speak. He said that it wasn't their responsibility. And me and my wife think it is the town responsibility. It's a fire hydrant. And they had to have a permit by the planning and zoning of Smithfield. When that contractor went to them with his plans, they had to give them a permit to put everything out there in that yard. And build a house, put everything out there. So they saw it when they did it. They knew what was going down there when it happened. So me and my wife feel like it shouldn't be in the middle of the yard because we're having to take care of something that ain't ours, you know, and we're having to sit up there, get somebody to come out, or either it's me out there trying to put dirt around it and get dirt and then put more seeds around it. I just spent this year alone, me and my wife just spent about $200 right there on grass seeds and dirt to do this yard, to get this yard back right this year. And then you can tell by looking at one of them pictures where you see the dark colored grass around the fire hydrant. That's the new grass they just grew. And then you see the dirt where I had to fill in because when I'm on the lawnmower and I go over it, it's sinking down, and then I have to put more dirt in it, and it ain't our responsibility to take care of the fire hydrant.
So just for clarification though, running water, so
Yeah.
the fire hydrant was there when you bought the house.
Yes.
So it wasn't installed afterwards.
No, it wasn't
it's
installed
definitely
after.
bought a house. And what scares me too, I have, in front of my house is a bunch of little kids. On this side of my house is kids. And they run, play with the ball. The other day, the little boy he went to get the ball to pick it up. He almost knocked himself out with that fire hydrant. Then I'm scared well, if I'm gone and these kids come play in my yard and get hurt with that fire hydrant, then they can sue my insurance company. I mean, it is sitting in the center.
It's up in the yard. It might be still in the right of way of y'all saying how much a fire hydrant will be, but it's in the center of the yard and it's up in the yard. It ain't like near the curb. It's right up in the middle of the yard. And I said, why would anybody allow somebody to put a fire hydrant right up in the middle of right in the middle of the yard? And it's just, and like she said, it's a hazard to kids. We got kids in our family. When our families come on, if they playing in the front yard, one on trip and hit that fire hydrant, then it's on our insurance to pay for it and stuff. And I don't think our insurance, because we got credible insurance, I don't think they just go sit there and say lightly, hey, we gonna pay for this when it's a fire hydrant.
And they took responsibility.
They did. They wrote this letter and took responsibility. And for 3 years, they were paying her the $120.
I have from 7/20/16, 7/20/17, where I got a discount, and I didn't get a discount this year. I supposed to got the 120 discount, but Mr. Scott said they weren't gonna give me nothing. He wasn't nice talking to me about it either. Real rude, no kind of feelings or nothing. We the one having to go pay to put dirt in that hole every year. And this not been 2 or 3 years, it's been 5, maybe 6 or 7 years. We've been having to haul dirt and grass out of our pocket.
And really, we want it moved because it's just...
They're not using it, y'all.
They're not using it. They don't even come to that fire hydrant. I see them down the street washing out the other fire hydrant. They won't even come to that one because it's in the center of the yard. They know if they come and do the water, that we go call them and tell them, look, you messed up our yard. What you gonna do about it?
Yeah, and I'm sure the chief knows we were talking about, but I'm assuming we just had to go around and look at all of our fire hydrants as part of our certification, right? I'm sure this would be one of them. Yes, you When you say they're not using it, I want to make sure that.
I mean, well, they have,
If
I'm
you had a fire at your
saying
house, if you had a fire at your house, would the fire truck hook up
I'm
to that?
saying
Is
they
it
have to
available?
let the water wash.
Okay, all right. I want to be clear there.
So to answer your question, we do test all of our fire hydrants, and no matter what location it's at, we do
Okay.
test them. I don't have the records right here in front of me, but I can show you that we test them. I wasn't fire chief in 2005. I can't tell you what happened during that time, but we do take care of, if we do flush a fire hydrant, we take care of the yard. As far as the location of the fire hydrants and the maintenance of the fire hydrants, that's not our department. That's the water department. They take care of that part. But I can tell you, we do flow all the fire hydrants to ensure that they are flowing.
Okay.
You may not see us, but we do. I can prove records. I'll get them to you. If you'll give me your address, I'll be glad to send you.
We just know that ain't nothing been
I
told
don't work.
them.
I don't work and I'm home all day.
Give me your address before I
retired.
leave, if you don't mind, and I will be glad to send you those test records, and we'll make
And
sure we're
I'm
getting
home every day. And if that fire
Yeah,
hydrant
and
would have had water, I would have
even if he do flush it, the problem is, the fire hydrant had to be permitted from the time of the contract. When the contractor came to the planning and zoning office, he came with his draft of what he was gonna do. And they had to agree to allow him to do it in the beginning. This is what we're stating. We're just saying that it's costing us money every year.
Yeah, no, and I can certainly understand it. Let us, let me suggest this, because this is the first we're hearing about this, right? I guess, probably for Ted, probably need to look into it. I would think there is some kind of recorded plat, Mr. Attorney, I would think, for the subdivision. There probably is an easement that runs through your property, and it's probably closer to your house than you actually think it may be, right? I, again, don't know this for sure, but I would assume, right, that fire hydrant is located within a recorded easement. Okay, so we need to look into all of that.
Yeah,
Let's look into it first, and see what we do have. Let's see if there is an easement. Let's see how close that utility easement runs to their house. Mr. Attorney, if you can get their address, you probably have all this information. Let's do a little bit more looking into it, because this is the first that we're hearing about this, and this agreement to reimburse. I have no idea where that one came from, right? But to your point, you have a letter. Do we have a copy of that letter?
That's Skinny Town.
Yes, we have it, so we already have a copy of the letter, so we don't need that.
Can you give me your names again? I know I can find them.
My name is Irene, Irene. You got that?
Yes, ma'am.
Shepherd, Shepherd, Alford, Alford.
And your husband?
And Gregory Alford.
But what you're saying, though, it's not just when they come and flush.
They don't.
They haven't flushed it recently.
Yeah,
It's still sinking down.
That's
right?
what,
And
that's what I've
you
been
guys are
trying to
having
say.
to repair.
Every year, it's sinking in, and hey, and I can tell because I go around it with the lawnmower, and you can tell it's sinking in, and I've been putting dirt in. I got dirt behind my storage building back there that I done bought so that I can fill it in. I got extra dirt out there behind my storage building that I paid for, that I got to keep so I can keep filling it in.
So let us check into it. What's a reasonable amount of time? 2 weeks? Is that enough time?
I'll have a quick.
Is that fair? Give us about 2 weeks, let's check into it, and the manager will get back with you.
But
And then, once we have some more information, then we'll kind of decide from there. Right?
Okay.
I just don't know what to tell you.
Okay.
in this moment.
And the main point is, we just don't want it to be right there in the center of our yard. And every time, it's an eyesore, it's a hazard to the kids out there. And plus, it's just a lot of work that we have to do to keep it up.
Okay.
And I just want to
One
make
question,
this.
one question. Now, did they put that there after you moved there or before you moved there?
It was there before.
It was there already when you moved there?
When we bought the house. It was
Okay,
there.
I'm just saying, I meant, you know,
Yeah,
that,
it was there, but when we bought the house.
But I didn't know it was going to
I
leak
understand.
and cause me all this headache.
Yeah.
I've run from snakes, now I got to run from
I
all.
understand.
Okay.
Okay,
Thank
does
you.
anybody have my pictures? Okay. But I do want to say this, it has not been run but one time, because I'm retired, I'm home every day, and if I went somewhere and come back, I would have saw the water all in the yard. So they haven't, since I've been there 14 years, haven't ran that hydrant but one time. And that was the time they had to come back and put dirt and put some grass seeds around, which didn't last, because the next year I had to start all over again.
So, can I ask a question? Sure. So if it's not, the water hadn't been run out of it, but you're still getting a hole.
That's why I was telling them it must have a leak or something, because it's still sitting there, but they said it don't have a leak. And I'm saying, but why does the ground keep going down there? Around it? Why every year we are having to put dirt in it? If it keeps sitting in, it's something.
Where is that subdivision?
I'll let our engineer speak on that, but.
Okay, yeah. I was wondering if they filled in that long. You had some rush.
All right, anyone else? I think someone else said some comments.
Before he speaks, my thing in all this is, it was something, it had to be something that constituted, read the right letter for them. And then, now all of a sudden, get it from them. The town manager said, they're not gonna get their credit. So that's the part where I'm kind of baffled at. There was a letter sent saying they was gonna get $120 credit or whatever in July. And now, the town manager saying, no, they're not. So that's kind of, I want to kind of get some answers to that.
I agree. I agree with that. I think we need to find a few more details out before we actually address that. Yes, sir.
Hello, my name is Judd Patterson, part owner of the Oak City Collection downtown on 3rd Street. I'd like to appreciate Dr. Barber's enthusiasm for retail, because we are retail. We're trying to grow it. To that end, we would like to see more retail on 3rd Street in downtown Smithfield. But it's really difficult when there's no parking. And I know you've probably heard this before, but I would say every other customer that does come into our store says, well, I finally found a parking spot, or I don't know how to parallel park, and I finally was able to pull in because there were two. But that's a rare occasion. So I just wanted to state that we need to do something about parking if we want to grow retail in downtown Smithfield, historic downtown Smithfield, and we're proud to be there. Something's got to be done about the parking. I know that they recently surveyed and started implementing a 2-hour, or enforcing the 2-hour, but they're not. I mean, maybe once every now and then you'll see a red ticket on a car, but that's once a month. So we would like to see something done to help free up some parking so that people can come and shop. And maybe other businesses would move into that area if they thought they could get some traction.
What do you propose?
Well, actually, an idea that we came up with, and I don't know what it would take to do this, but if 3rd Street became one way and you had angled parking so that cars that were coming down 3rd Street could just pull in at an angle, that would probably create a lot of parking spaces. I don't know, I mean, it seems like that would be something difficult to get done, but if it were done, it would create a lot more parking. There seems to be a lot of sheriff's deputies' cars parked there, I guess, for court. I don't know if could be designated areas for that. You asked me what I propose. That's one of the things.
What would you think about, just asking, the issue of trying to get people to move through there so that they're staying there all day long? One day I work in downtown Raleigh, and of course, there's meter parking everywhere. Right. And it ain't really metered, they just got a box.
No, I know what
and
you're
have to put
in there too.
Which is great, and by the way, it's great because it's easy to do. But, I mean, what would you think of that? I mean, I'm not saying that we're going to do that, but would you think that might be an answer to move people along? Because they can only stay there maximum 2 hours anyway, because that's the maximum you can put in the car but not coming back out.
Well, and it would be a revenue generator, really.
Well, but I'm not as concerned about revenue as I am getting people to move through the community. Because it's It's like $1 an hour or something. It's not big bucks anyway,
Well,
but
Durham
the point is
just
to move them
implemented
through the community. That's what I was wondering. I didn't know.
I mean, Durham just implemented parking meters, and, you know, I like to go to Durham, and we have customers in Durham, and it's kind of like, oh, I was complaining about the parking meters, but at the same time, I understand why they're there, and I would agree to that.
I don't have any trouble I'm going to downtown Raleigh. If I find an empty space, I don't mind paying $1 to park.
Right.
I mean, if I can find me a space, I don't have any trouble. I just didn't know. I didn't know if that was something that,
I mean, I
you know,
actually-
how
I
would the
thought of
downtown
that too,
community
it
people
just slipped my
feel
mind.
about doing something like that? Would that make a difference? You know, would that be detrimental to getting people to park downtown because they're used to going to the malls or Walmart or wherever, and there's no cost for parking? Would that be detrimental to the downtown area? That's what I'm saying.
I don't think it would be, but.
There used to be.
A long time ago, they were.
Yeah, but the new meter stuff is
Oh,
so much
I-
easier.
I-
Isn't it? A whole lot easier.
Yeah, it's automated.
Mark
and-
spaces and go back to business, yeah.
Right.
Use a debit card now. Ain't even no money. You don't use, just use debit card.
I've had my say. Is there any other questions?
Thank you. It's an issue when we're constantly talking about and trying to come up with ideas. But I certainly understand, appreciate your comments, and we'll certainly continue to strive to make it where we can turn over those parking spots.
All right, well, when you find one, everybody come down and see us.
Thank you, sir.
Anyone else for citizens' comments? Seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda.
I move we approve the consent agenda.
Second. I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor? Opposed? All right, council members' comments. Anything else?
Mr. Mayor, just real briefly, Tony Nixon had to leave, but he's the chair of the East Smithfield Improvement Organization, and a few weeks ago, we had our 6th annual Fun in the Park, so this definitely like to give a couple of big thank yous out to number one, Parks and Rec, Gary's crew, they did a good job, Tiffany and all the young ladies, Chief Powell, who cooking up hot dogs, courtesy of David Stevens and Stevens Sauces, Stevens Hot Dogs. Shannon did a good job every year, working in the concession stand, serving up popcorn and snow cones. She works hard every year. I kind of tease her a little bit. She don't work here, she work out there. Also, Chief Blanton, the fire department, who came out there, with the water for kids, and in fact, towards the end of the event, I even had a big splash myself, but definitely also to I guess it's the Hispanic group, Chief Powell that was out there. They did a wonderful job. Lenny, his crew, definitely had the trash receptacles out there, made the cleanup real easy. And here again, it was our 6th annual Fun in the Park. It was a great day, a little old cast to start out with, but it turned out to be a nice hot sunny day. We definitely enjoyed it and look forward to having it every year. And the kids had a great time. We had Jim Art, a long-time DJ. It was the first time out there this year. He did a wonderful job. And just like to say thank you for everybody coming together and supporting this event.
Anyone else?
I would say that we're still confident that we need a newspaper, and it's going to happen. I'm telling you, it's going to happen. Watch and see. Watch and see. We need a newspaper, and we're going to have a newspaper, and then everybody's going to be able to hear about all the great things going on in the town of Smithfield, and we won't have to wonder, you were doing stuff in secret, which we know we're not, but everybody's not here now. I think we're doing it in secret, so we need the newspaper.
Mayor, real quick, the Downtown Development Committee asked to review the bylaws and such. We've met, I'll ask council.
We met on 2 occasions with a committee of downtown development, and to try to figure out what was really going on with the request for amendment to their bylaws, and the issue is voting for ex officio members. And we reviewed the history of bylaw changes, and it's just gone back and forth, and there's really some disagreement on that board. And basically, we just sort of left it as, you as a board just need to figure out what you want to do and then come back to us. We could not resolve anything via committee. That's sort of my take on it, Travis.
It seemed to be a consensus. It was a good discussion. I don't know about that. We got a lot of good things going. I think that they're going to bring back some changes. Be satisfactory. Disagreement. So, not necessarily disagreement, but I want to thank Councilman Ashley for his efforts and time. He put a long time into that. His efforts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few things. You may recall that the council approved using some funds from tourism to come up with a design for the amphitheater down in Town Commons. That is about completed. We hope to have something in front of you to look at and discuss at the next meeting in September. I want to point out a couple of positive things. We talked to our work comp insurance provider today. We learned that we have the lowest experience modification rating, which is a rating that these insurance carriers use over a period of 3 consecutive years, how many claims you have of any city in the state of North Carolina for our work comp claims. That means our people are working very hard to try to be safe in the field, not get injured. And that really helps our premium stay low. So hats off to our staff here keeping those things down. You are provided with your report a copy of the new, from Withers and Ravenel, our pavement condition survey for all of our streets in town. You can take that with you and review it. On the top of that, stapled to that, are the streets that we are intending to do this fall. They are in the order as recommended by the study, with the exception of Equity Drive, which is number 2, and we've all had discussions on Equity Drive, and it's just too big of a piece to bite off right now. And White Oak Drive, which we are going to wait until the next round. It'll still be in this budget period, but there is construction going on there. We are concerned if we resurface that, it's just going to get damaged again right away. So we want to wait for that construction to be done. So we will add White Oak Drive to the top of the list in the spring when we do our second round of street research. If you have any questions about any of that, contact me or Lenny Branch from Public Works, and we'll do our best to answer those questions. The only other thing I have, very quickly, Mr. Mayor, is on page 318 of your agenda packet, you have the noted criminal offenses that are reported to the police department during the current year, calendar year, up to basically the first half of this year. And I draw your attention that our serious crimes, what's called our Part 1 crimes, that includes your burglaries, robberies, your violent crimes, are down already this year by 21%, also as compared to last year. Also, our property crimes are down by 13% as compared to last year. Now, this is a continuing trend that's gone on for almost 10 years now, and it's the more you go down, the harder it is to keep it going down and stop it from plateauing. And what you see in front of you is a really great effort by your police department to work very hard with the limited staff they have to make sure that we're doing the right things to influence crime and keep it low in Smithfield. Something we should all be very proud of. It adds to our economic development position, as well as just an overall quality of life for all of our citizens. So hats off to the police department and all the work they're doing. And that's all I have, Mr.
Mayor, one last thing, speaking of the police department, actually, today, actually before I came to the meeting, I guess it was the first national night out that we had here. I had a chance to stop by the outlet center, and, you know, it was just a great event. I hated I had to leave. I just went, cooking hot dogs today at the end of the day, but, I just hope, you know, in the future, I know, it's always the first Tuesday that, you know, we can possibly do something to our meetings, just so everybody can get out there, because it was a wonderful event. I mean, people, you know, stopping by, having fun. Jim Mark was out there at the end of the day, but, I just, Stevens hot dogs on grill. It was a good occasion, though. I hated I had to leave and, you know, get here, but, kudos to the police department again. And also the sheriff was there, and, the fire, you know, it's just a great event. So, hopefully next year we can all participate.
We actually had 45. What was that? Really? Wow.
Really?
Anything else, gentlemen?
Second.
All in favor?